Good evening. Welcome to the Cabarrus County Board of Education work session. Today is Monday, August 5th. I'll call the meeting to order. We'll start off with a moment of silence for Aiden Wright, a student at Winkler Middle School who recently passed away. Please join me. Thank you. Board members, I'll take a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Shoemaker made the motion. Mr. Harrison seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes 7-0. And I will share that Mr. Walter, our vice chair, is joining us by way of phone due to a work commitment. We now have an activity on our agenda. I'll first turn it over to Dr. Louder for some updates, and then we'll turn it over to Ms. Blackwell.
Yeah, we just say it's my pleasure we get to introduce two people who are at their first board meetings tonight. First, we'll start with Kate Highsmith, the Cabarrus County Teacher of the Year. So she will be our teacher liaison this year and joining us for meetings, so we welcome her. Thank you, Kate. If you can join me in a round of applause for Kate. We look forward to working with you this year. And also our new elementary director, Sarah Reeves, who also is at her first board meeting tonight. So if you can please join me in welcoming Sarah as part of our group. Thank you very much.
And before Ms. Blackwell starts, I just want to share that we will be going off camera for our team building activity, and then we'll come back and start at the next agenda item for the consent agenda after that. So Ms. Blackwell.
Sure. So one of the things that Chris and I discussed at a previous meeting that we had was that we would really like to do some team building between the school board and administration. So we are going to go off of camera to do this, but this is an activity that I've done a couple of times in work environments, but we toss the ball to each other and say something nice. So that's what we're going to do while we're off camera.
We'll rejoin our television audience momentarily.
Okay, so everybody.
And I think that was great fun, Ms. Blackwell. We will now move to the items to be considered for the August 12th consent agenda. And at 5.01, we have the beginning teacher support plan. And welcome, Ms. Angie Wood.
Can I just make one comment before Angie gets started? I'm sorry. One other thing that came out in the meeting with the board members was just to maybe emphasize the purpose of the work session. I think a couple board members said, I'm not sure that we've stated that overtly, so I think it's probably a good idea to do that now, is ultimately say we have a work session, we have a business session, and while sometimes everybody just kind of assumes that we know, they really kind of have two different purposes. In essence, the work session, this session, is supposed to be considerably more informal. The setup is a little more informal with the intent that any question that a board member has, anything we don't understand, this is when it really is a very positive thing to kind of say, wait a minute, I don't understand that, or could you re-explain that, or I've got 3 questions. We may not be able to answer tonight, but to be able to get you those answers as quickly as possible so you can process them, so when we get to the business session, you don't have those. So it doesn't mean that you're going to vote or we know how you're going to vote. It just means that we're ultimately trying to say, this is when we work it out, and the business session is in essence to do business. So I think it may be a good time just to reemphasize that and say, we want you to ask questions. We want you to kind of push, needle, whatever it is that you need to do to make sure that everything's gone. So when we get to the business section, there aren't any more questions. So again, if there are any questions that Ms. Furtenbaugh wants to add to that, again, sorry to interrupt Angie before you get started, but I think just from hearing that, I'd say we probably need to say that out loud maybe a couple more times a year to make sure that we understand there really is a different purpose for that.
Good. All right, thank you. Good evening. We take great pride in supporting the growth and development of our beginning teachers, and the state requires that we review our beginning teacher program annually for board approval. So There are several key personnel involved in our beginning teacher support program, and that includes Glenda Jones, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Dr. Keisha Khan, the Director of Human Resources, myself as the beginning teacher coordinator, and the most important work takes place at the school level with our school administrators, lead mentors, and mentors. Our mentors are the folks who are really supporting our beginning teachers on a daily basis. So we are excited this year that our new employee orientation will be held at J.M. Robinson, August 12th, 13th, and 14th. The first day is for our beginning teachers to have an overview of curriculum and instruction. This will be the day that professional development is provided by our curriculum instruction specialists, and they'll be broken out into subject areas and grade levels that day. On the second day, we'll focus on the beginning teacher support program, the teacher evaluation instrument, effective classroom management, as well as student engagement. And then on day 3, that is when all of our new certified employees to the district attend. And on that day, we'll have our legal briefing, drug-free workplace, as well as a presentation from technology and finance. We're also excited on day 3, on August 14th, we'll have our Cabarrus Spotlight Fair. We have over 20 local businesses and sponsors for that event, and that will be followed up by a luncheon. And we also have our very own Kate Colbreth, who will be this keynote speaker during the luncheon. She was the 2019 North Carolina Southwest Regional Teacher of the Year, so we're very excited to have her join us that day. All of our beginning teachers will receive the First Days of School book by Harry Wong, as well as Teach Like a Champion by Doug Lemov. Both of these books will be integrated into the professional development that takes place during new employee orientation and also throughout the school year, which I'll talk about in a moment. Also, Curriculum and Instruction has created several different Canvas courses where they will be housing professional development resources for teachers for the school year. And then we also have a beginning teacher webpage with our new teacher electronic handbook as well. At the school level, all schools will also have a new employee orientation for their new beginning teachers as well as new employees to their building. And this is really a time for our beginning teachers to meet with their mentors and acclimate themselves to the school, meet the personnel at the school, and begin talking about the specific policies and procedures at the school level. We also are providing additional support to our residency teachers. These teachers are teachers coming to us without an education background. So we have once again partnered with the North Carolina New Teacher Support Program to provide additional classroom coaching. So we'll have 2 coaches assigned to our district who will meet with these teachers weekly. They'll also be invited to a 2-day institute provided by that program, the North Carolina New Teacher Support Program, as well as attend, and they will actually provide professional development monthly for those teachers as well. They will be integrating the book, The First Year Teacher's Survival Guide, into those professional development sessions. And from our Curriculum and Instruction Department, we are excited about the ongoing support and professional development that they will be providing. They have increased their support to include not only reading and math, but this year they will also be including science and social studies. And then our Exceptional Children's Department is having a 3-year cohort for beginning teachers to provide additional support. And within the Human Resources Department, myself as the beginning teacher coordinator, I oversee the beginning teacher support program and new employee orientation, as well as our mentor training and mentor support checklists, and work very closely with our licensure specialists to ensure that our beginning teachers have the correct things that they need for their licensure and testing requirements, et cetera. We also have a beginning teacher support program review every 5 years. We are up for our review in 2021-22. And the administrators at the school level, they are the ones who will be assigning mentors, really looking for a good fit for each beginning teacher. making sure that if possible, they have common planning periods, they are on the same grade level or the same subject area. They're going to monitor the process for our beginning teachers and help support them, provide coaching and support throughout the school year. And they also collaborate with the lead mentor to provide professional development at the school level for those beginning teachers. So the lead mentors, there's one lead mentor at every school, and they serve as a liaison to the mentors, beginning teachers, administration, and myself. I communicate a lot with the lead mentors. We also have an annual meeting so that I can provide them with any updates and kind of district goals for the year. And they coordinate the support for beginning teachers and mentors, and also oversee the submissions of the mentor support checklists. And as I mentioned earlier, our mentors are truly those who are working directly with the beginning teachers on a regular basis. They are asked to meet with them a minimum of once a week. Oftentimes this is much more than that. And they're supporting our beginning teachers in a variety of areas, including classroom management, lesson planning, instructional strategies, best practices, and family communication. They also attend mentor training in order to serve as a mentor, and so we offer mentor training multiple times throughout the school year. I did offer it last week, and we have one coming up on Wednesday of this week. And all of our beginning teachers are on a comprehensive evaluation plan by the state guidelines. That starts with a self-assessment, and then they will write 2 to 3 professional development goals in their professional development plan, working with their mentor and administrators on this plan. And they'll receive 3 full observations from administrators at the school level, 1 peer observation by a teacher that's not their mentor, because the mentor is supposed to be there for support. And at the end of the year, the principal will meet with them to review their summary evaluation. So every year I collect quotes from our beginning teachers and ask them to give us advice. Ask them to give advice to the new beginning teachers. So these were a few that stood out. Absorb everything around you. Your fellow co-teachers have so much knowledge to share. You don't have to figure out things on your own. Seek support whenever needed and have a positive attitude. It goes a really long way establishing good relationships with your students. The theme that always comes out of these quotes is support, looking for others to support them and knowing that they do have support at their schools. And so and if you'll flip to the next slide, the last one really stood out, and this is what we want for every beginning teacher and every student. So for our beginning teachers to have fun and ensure that students have positive experiences in your classroom each and every day. So that is all I have. Are there any questions?
Yeah, thank you. I did want to call on Ms. Highsmith. Your first meeting, so you can offer. How do you see the beginning teacher support plan affecting your peers who are new to your school?
I think it's key for new teachers. It's such
Can
a
you turn the microphone on your thing? Sorry.
I think that the new teacher support is key for young teachers that are new, whether they have gone through the licensure program or they're just new to education from a different avenue. That time is such a time of exponential growth, as in any new job. And what we can do to retain those new teachers, I think, will contribute to the longevity of our teachers in the classroom.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Board members, any questions or comments from Ms. Wood?
I have one follow-up.
Okay, Rob?
Last year, every speaker, the teacher, I guess what they do, when I found out the slide this year, any reason why?
The keynote, I think Kate is giving the keynote this year.
She was the Southwest Regional Teacher of the Year.
I can't hear, sorry.
Because she was the Southwest Regional Teacher of
Yeah.
the Year. Yeah. So usually we use the teacher, I'm sorry. Usually you invite the Teacher of the Year from the year before to speak. So I think Emily Francis did the year before that. Is that what the question is, Rob?
Yeah, I think Rob, you're.
Different, why we didn't do this this year?
We are. Yeah, Kate is on that slide as being the keynote.
Yes, so actually Kate Highsmith will be joining us on the first day to talk about the mission and vision Division of Cabarrus County Schools. And then on day 3, Kate Colbreth will be doing the keynote.
Okay, any other questions?
I was just going to make a comment. So I'm actually really excited to see this as a program. Like, I didn't realize that this existed, but I do think this is fantastic for new teachers that are coming on in Cabarrus County, because I can imagine how overwhelming it is coming out of school and, you know, really getting your first job teaching, and then just kind of being lost as to what to do. So this is, I think, a really awesome program that y'all are doing.
Good. Thank you.
Do we know how many brand spanking new ones we're getting this year?
So far, we have 94 first-year teachers, and we have 100 new to the district teachers. 94 is about in the normal range. We usually have 80 to 100, so we're up to 94 so far.
Thank you.
So I have a couple comments. Angie, I really love all of, I read through every bit of paperwork that you provide and the guidelines that you have, and they're really extraordinary. One of the comments, though, in the successful mentors, you said should be the best practitioners in the profession, and I wondered if you ought to change best to like high-level performers or something like that, rather than, because I was looking at your criteria, and it didn't seem like, number one, not everybody can have the best, so I was wondering how you might want to phrase that a little bit. And then some of the acronyms that are used in some of the different forms, they're in some forms, but they're not in others, so just get some consistency on the acronyms, and that would be the only thing that I would offer. I really love all the material, and I think this program has just done so much for our school system and for the teachers, so I appreciate the hard work that you're doing with this.
Thank you. I can certainly work on the acronyms. Education is alphabet soup sometimes.
So we're going to ask to take just a brief pause to reset our mics. Some of the mics are not working. Okay, we are back, and hopefully all the mics are on and working now. Board members, for item 5.01, are we okay with consent agenda? Everybody okay? Okay, that item will be on the consent agenda. On 5.02, we have policy revisions for approval on first reading, and we have Ms. Reimer, Ms. Burns with us.
Good evening, Board Chair, members of the Board. Tonight we have 6 policies on first read. The first one is a request of the Board of Education, and the other 5 are PLS updates. The first one is 6315. This is an addition by one of our board members that we add no texting and not interfering with cameras while driving to that policy. Policy 7130 is a licensure policy that updates terminology in Section A, updates requirements for the LEAs, bringing teacher support program into Section C, and updates legal references. Policy 7300, staff responsibilities, adds information regarding driver education and updates legal references. Policy 7610 adds new language that's intended to refute any claim that the policy creates a contractual right to a legal defense. Policy 7730, employee conflict of interest, revises the introductory paragraph to be more clear and reorganizes the policy into separate sections on conflicts related to contracts, misuse of information, non-school employment, and receipt of gifts. Policy 7940, classified personnel, provides information to clarify the meaning of classified positions and at-will employees, and clarifies that such employees cannot be dismissed or suspended for any reason that is discriminatory or otherwise unlawful.
Okay, board members, let's start with 6315. Any questions or comments? Okay, I think those are good additions for the clarifications that are added.
Under number B, does it just assume that they'd have a background check and provide training? Or does that need to be in there as well?
I think that's probably in the hiring policies.
So all of that information is,
That as well.
Okay. Ms. Jones?
Yes, I was going to say, all of that information is in 7300. It's in separate policies about the pre-employment requirements.
Okay, it is there.
Okay, well, as long as it's there, I'm okay with that. Just when I first volunteer bus drivers, just raises a little bit of a flag, make sure that that's clear.
Yeah. Okay, so 7130, any questions on those policy updates? Can I just say the driver's consent on the first one? Consent on the second one?
Yes?
Licensure. Staff responsibilities, any questions? Okay, consent?
Yes?
7610, defensive board employees, any questions? Okay, consent agenda? Okay. 7730, employee conflict of interest. Questions? Okay, consent agenda? Okay. And 7940, classified personnel, suspension and dismissal. Any questions? Okay, consent? Okay. So all of that section of first reading will be on the consent agenda at next Monday's meeting. So we'll now go to 5.03, the policy revisions for approval on second reading. And we did go through these once already in July. Board members, are there any questions or comments about these items? Okay. Are we okay with consent for the slate on second reading?
And a quick question on 4125.
Okay. Go.
Under, I guess it's page 3B1A, second sentence there.
Okay, hold on. Let us get to that, Rob. 4125,
Yes, 4125.
section B.
B1A.
Okay.
On that second line, it says immediately. Is that a requirement? Do we have to have that word there? I guess it's an attorney question.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is Brian speaking. That is a legal requirement immediately. You have to enroll the child, and then we deal with any potential issues that might arise.
You don't try to deal with the issues and then,
Nope, that's what the federal law says.
yeah, well, if the law says it, that's fine. It's reading through it. Would have done it the other way around.
Okay. Any other comments on the second reading policies? Okay, are we okay on consent agenda for all of this group? Okay, I'm seeing.
Can you put 4154 on action?
And what's the question there?
On number 8, I'm just not comfortable with not having a right to appeal at the end.
Okay, so let's pull that one up. 4154. And which, at the very end, you said?
Yes.
And what item number? So, number 7?
That's number 8.
There is no number 8 on 4154.
There is in my copy. Okay, well, if it's changed, anyway, we'll.
Mr. Walters, I think you may be looking at an older copy, and what you're asking for, Mr. Shaw did change and put in number 2. So I'm not sure if you have that version.
Could you,
The copy I printed out had it, so if we just wait till next week, we'll resolve it.
yeah. Could you scroll up? This is Brian Shaw. Yeah, we eliminated what used to be 5 at the policy committee meeting.
Okay, I remember the conversation.
And then that changed what used to be 8 to 7.
Okay.
Okay, so, Rob, you still want it on action?
Yes, please.
Okay, so 4154 will be on action. All others will be on consent. I'm sorry? And what about? No, we're just doing it as a group, as second reading, since there were no other comments. So do you want that one separate? Okay. Okay, thank you. We will now move to the action agenda for 6.01. And this one we are being asked to vote on tonight. We delayed based on some updates received from DPI between our work session and our previous business meeting. So Dr. Hill has provided us information, and she'll walk through some of that now about what the plan is for our district.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Louder, Ms. Furtenbaugh, members of the board. As you will recall, on June 3rd, I was here at the work session and presented to you the iReady contract that we wanted to move forward with for reading and math for our elementary schools. That was on June 3rd. On June 7th, we received an email from the state superintendent informing us that the K-3 assessment for the Read to Achieve legislation was changing from M-Class to iStation. At that point, I contacted Dr. Louder and Ms. Furtenbaugh and asked that we pull this item from the agenda because the similarities of the instructional side of iStation is similar to the instructional side of iReady. So as you may know, there's been a lot of consternation about this decision. It's been in the news probably every week since on June 7th. It's on the State Board of Education agenda again this week, so there's lots of discussion about it. What I do want to make clear is the State Board has said that we're moving forward with iStation as the K-3 assessment. So Cabarrus County Schools, of course, will follow that. We will be using iStation in all 20 of our elementary schools for the K-3 reading assessment as required by the Read to Achieve legislation. The piece that's different is the state does not provide the instructional piece. So what we've used in Cabarrus County Schools since 2014 is the iReady personalized learning track. So what happens is a kiddo, my Morgan's in 4th grade last year, she sits down, she takes the beginning of year diagnostic assessment that's kind of like a game. It gives the teacher a readout of where she is with all of the 5 areas of reading, and then it provides her a personalized learning track that she does during the school day, about 15-20 minutes a day. Sometimes she does it at home for extra practice. So that's the piece that we've brought to you to purchase for iReady reading and also math. Again, we put a halt with it because the state went with iStation, and because they're so similar, we wanted to explore the opportunity to use iStation instead of iReady. Over the summer, Ms. Reeves has been wonderful in this transition. She has been in constant communication with iStation. What we wanted to do is have a pilot over the summer to have a few teachers take a look at it. However, iStation was unable to give us a pilot over the summer because they're trying to gear up for the massive undertaking with working with the whole state with the K-3 assessment. So what we've decided to do, we've collaborated with administrators. What we've decided to do is move forward with iReady for kindergarten through 5th grade. That will be the diagnostic assessment, which then again gives the personalized learning path for the students in reading and math. And we will do that at 15 of our elementary schools. And then 5 schools have raised their hand and said, we would like to pilot iStation, which I think is a great idea. If you all recall, we piloted iReady Math last year, and that's how we got to this decision. So we have 5 schools that are going to pilot iStation, reading and math. We believe that this will give us a great opportunity to take a look at both products to see what best fits the needs of the students, the teachers, and the parents here in Cabarrus County Schools. At mid-year, we'll make a decision, and at that point, we will bring it to you. So this evening, I'm asking for your vote for the curriculum associates. As you'll notice, what I shared on June 3rd, the number, the item amount is less, about $70,000 less. Of course, it's less because before I was presenting 20 schools using this product, now we're using 15. And I'm bringing this to you all because the amount exceeds the $250,000 that I am authorized to approve. So I'm asking for approval tonight, again, which is, we usually don't ask for approval at a work session, but school is about to start. So we would like to go ahead and move forward so we can make the purchase and we can be ready on the first day of school. Are there any questions?
So board members?
Madam Chair. Dr. Hill, how did you choose the 5 schools, or was there a process that you used to use them as the pilot schools?
Sure. So we had we met with all of the principals about a week after this announcement was made, to explain to them what was going on. We had multiple conversations. Ms. Reeves met with the principals as well, and ultimately we decided that if we were going to move forward with iReady, that it would be a good idea to pilot. So she simply asked schools if they would be interested in piloting, and we had 5 schools that raised their hand and said they would be interested in a pilot.
So iReady and iStation, is that right?
Yes, sir. Very confusing.
iReady and iStation both can help us follow the North Carolina's curriculum standards. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
correct? And so they're set up so that no matter what, our teachers will be on the right track as they go through the year to follow the schedule for introducing that
Yes, sir.
curriculum to the students.
Yes.
Mr. Harrison?
Dr. Hill, thank y'all for your professional work on this stuff. And your average parents going iStation, iReady, iStation. As somebody who might not have known that I was dyslexic until I was 15, can you break this down into parent speak? Will these programs assess children's reading deficiencies or their learning style, maybe is an old word? Will we catch and be able to identify and assist parents' understanding of their child's way of learning with either of these tools, without getting into the professional details of one versus the other? Will these several different programs capture and identify and help parents and families help their kids know how they learn and how to be successful?
Thank you for that question. It's an excellent one. That is actually one of the questions that's been debated about this decision to go with iStation to replace Reading 3D MClass, because the iStation assessment is radically different from the tool that we've used since 2014 with the Read to Achieve legislation. It is very different. So there are organizations with the Exceptional Children's Department that are challenging this tool because they do not feel that it captures students that may have dyslexia. One thing that I will say that in Cabarrus County Schools, regardless of what tool is used for the K-3 assessment to fulfill legislation, we have a very strong handle on using multiple assessment tools to make sure that we're meeting the needs of students. So we do this because we're required to by law, but we want every family to feel confident that we use a variety of assessments to determine how students are performing and to determine what needs they have.
Is the $309,671, is that local money? Is that state money? Is it a combination of?
It's textbook funds.
State money.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank everyone for your work on this.
So just kind of a tandem question to the expense. Even with iStation, what this DPI has now decided to go with, we still have to pay for it, correct? It's not like one's free and one's not.
That's correct. So the only thing that DPI does is they give us the assessment. They don't give us any of the personalized instruction that goes with it. So even when we go, like, let's just pretend we fast forward to this time next year and we decide to go with iStation, it may be a little bit less expensive because they're picking up the cost of the diagnostic for K-3 reading only, not 4th and 5th grade reading and not K-5 math. So we did, in this process, we asked for what the cost would be if we went with iStation K-5 at all the schools. And the cost ended up being, with iReady Math and iStation Reading, it was about, I think, $60,000, maybe $40,000. Is that right, Sarah? $40,000 more if we would have done that. So at this point, we haven't even looked at their math, so we have no idea what their math looks like. And I just did not think that it was wise to invest this amount of money into a product that we'd never laid eyes on.
So is this concept with the 5 schools piloting, is it going to be a bit of a train the trainer mechanism?
Yes, it will give us an opportunity, one, to look at the product, but then also run through training with those schools. And if we end up liking the product and feel like it's beneficial, then we've have early adopters per se, and then can roll that out to a larger scale. If we decide mid-year that we don't want to go with iStation, then we will continue with Curriculum Associates iReady, a tool that we've used since 2014.
And one of the things that I caught from the various news reports, because there has been a lot of Education Week attention and whatnot to this topic, is that it is completely online for iStation reading, whereas iReady is instructor engaged.
Not iReady, but the M-Class.
M-Class.
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. So the assessment tool that we used before, the teacher had an iPad, but the student, for the most part, it was one-on-one, and the student was reading a book, and the teacher was checking it off on her iPad. Now the students will sit in front of a computer and complete an assessment, which is why we just met 2 weeks ago with the CAOs with the large district, the folks that are in my role, and each of us were talking about that we're going to have to supplement the assessment that the state has adopted because it, like I said, it's radically different than what we used before, and nothing takes the place of a teacher sitting with the student and listening to them read. Nothing can take that place.
And may I follow up, please? So if the cost of this pure software is $309,000, are you implying that there's going to be some additional costs to bring in a live teacher to do some of the
No. No, sir.
additional work to get the data
No,
presented?
sir.
No?
No,
So
sir.
it'll just be a straight output from the software?
No,
What
no,
will
no,
it
I'm
look like when the child goes through an assessment?
Great question. So what I meant was, so with the new assessment tool, the iStation, the new K-3 required assessment, the student will sit down on a computer and they will have headphones. Again, I've not seen it live. Sarah's attended a training. But the student will sit down, they'll have a headphone on, they'll be shown some words, they'll speak into a computer. The computer will give it an analysis. But what I meant by nothing takes the place of a student, I strongly believe, as do many educators across the state, that a teacher still is going to have to sit down and listen to a child read to determine their individual reading level. So again, it's one piece of the puzzle, but the iStation K-3 assessment is not going to give us the full picture. To your point about will it detect dyslexia?
You can't automate education.
That's right. It's a tool, but the teacher is vitally important. It's a resource.
Okay, board member, other comments, questions?
One quick question for me.
Okay.
Going back to 6 months ago, which one of these products is going to get us to the 63% goal for proficiency?
Well, I don't put all my eggs in any tool. I believe that the most valuable tool to making sure that our students are reading on grade level is the classroom teachers that we put in buildings every day. So I'm not going to tell you that one tool is going to do it over the other. I will not ever say that. What I will say is that the tool that we've used since 2014 has been a great indicator for our teachers and a great compass to point them in the correct directions to identify specific needs of students while providing a personalized learning track. So while a teacher's working with a small group of students, over here with 6, that my Morgan can sit on the computer for 15 minutes and work on vocabulary or fluency or whatever her deficit is at that time. It is a tool, but it is not the answer to get us where we need to be. The teacher is always and will always be the most important person in the classroom.
That's the kind of response I was expecting. Thank you.
Okay, board members, I will take a motion that we approve the Curriculum Associates iReady Elementary Math, Reading and Math as presented.
So moved.
Mr. Harrison made the motion, Mr. Shoemaker made the second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Dr. Hill.
Thank you.
Okay, now we will move forward with the items for consideration or action at the August 12th business meeting. So first we have 7.01. Mr. Louder and Mr. Taylor will join us.
Good evening, board members. Dr. Louder. I'm here to ask for your consideration to move forward with awarding Snyder Electric Phase 3 of the JN Freeze HVAC project, which will include replacing all exhaust fans and the main HVAC unit for the administration area. Pretty straightforward. Any questions?
And this was as planned when you brought us the first two phases, right?
Yes, ma'am.
This is just the next one in line. Okay. And it's already funded? Because Kelly's shaking her head yes.
Mr. Taylor, will this cover the portion of JN Freeze, which used to be the Performance Learning Center, and as the Performance Learning Center moved out and this new equipment is...
Yes, sir. It's inclusive of all wings.
Were there any challenges? Well, I'm sorry, that type of thing was never separate, just because it was a high school and a middle school at the same time. Did you have any challenges in the empty wing?
No more than any other structure that we would do this renovation on.
Now, do we need to approve this now or just at the next meeting?
No, ma'am, we're actually catching up, so it'll be fine to approve it next meeting if you like. If you'd like to approve it tonight, I'll be more than happy to take it.
Yeah.
Since you brought it up.
Yeah. Mr. Shar, are we okay if we put that on consent agenda, if the board is fine with that? Okay.
Yes.
Board members, any other questions?
I just have one.
Sure.
So Schneider Electric's going to be doing the controls, and do the controls match up with the controls that you're using now, or is it going to be an integration issue that you have later on with your dashboard that you're using to try to control all your schools with?
Yes, sir. It is a move forward with Tritium, and that is a standard that we're trying to maintain.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, board members, consideration for consent? Good? Everybody good?
That'll make him happy.
Okay, thank you.
Make Chuck happy.
Next, we have item 7.02 regarding the architect contract approval for the new middle school, planned to open in 2022. We have Mr. Cohn. I don't know if Mr. Louder's coming up or not. You hanging back?
Good evening, Dr. Louder, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm here tonight to present to you the contract for the architectural services on the new middle school that is slated to open in 2022 for Cabarrus County Schools. We have broken that contract into two phases. Phase 1 is being funded in fiscal year 1920, and the balance of that will be funded in fiscal year 2021 by Cabarrus County. A copy of the contract is uploaded into board docs. I will tell you that the dollar amount in board docs was a typo, and it is $25,000 off, so it is supposed to be $2,250,000, not $2,225,000.
Okay, and I had sent a couple questions asking if the, some of the roles that were TBD in there were going to be to get a little more of the detail in the original approval of the contract.
Correct.
Do you think that can be obtained for next week?
Yeah, so I reached out to our attorney and asked him if that was okay to do that. I also reached out to the architect because they don't have their consultant agreements in place until this one is approved. That's why they did not insert them. But I did speak with Andrew at Hartsman Williams, and he said it was fine for us to do that if we wanted to, so I can take care of that.
Okay, because I'm interested in seeing if we have, you know, the minority contractors in place. That has always been one of our qualifiers to encourage that participation.
So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them.
Board members?
I just really want to make a comment more than a question, or it may be a question for Brian. So when we've addressed some of these in our construction committee meeting, I've asked for a postmortem to be done on Mount Pleasant Middle School.
Yes.
And I really want that to be incorporated as they go through their process. And I know you're starting to work on that.
Correct, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you know when we'll have some results?
We have the results already, so, and we're
Oh.
working on setting up those program meetings now with the administration and staff.
Okay, great.
So,
So it's not, it won't affect the contract, you're saying it from an action of learning
Well,
as the new one gets
no,
built?
it'll just, as far as their design concept. All right.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, board members?
Well, we'll vote on this. This will be an open vote, right? It's-
Next week, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So
Okay.
as a matter of schedule, after if we approve this next week, then you'll be moving forward with the architect. What's the next step that has to go for that middle school? 'Cause,
next step with the architect or in the
well,
project as a whole?
in the project as a whole.
So the next step in the project as a whole is we'll release the RFQ for our construction manager at risk firms, so that we can solicit those firms and bring them on board. The goal was to have about a month's worth of design development work with the architect, then bring that CM at risk firm on board to start working through the means and methods of the project.
So when do you anticipate the board to see that information?
The construction manager at risk, that will be at next month's meeting.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? We'll put this on the action agenda for next week.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on our agenda, 7.03, regarding the Cherry Road Oracle Statement of Work.
Yes, Board, in July, I shared with you a presentation on how we needed to move toward a new software for our financial and HR needs. And attached is the statement of work / contract that we will need to sign to enter into that agreement. Are there any questions or anything related to the contract that I can help you with?
And I'm just curious if there's any updates from the state level as far as how this is proceeding.
So it's, I've been extremely pleased with the state support and Oracle support. One thing I did send to the board between last meeting and this meeting is that the state did approve 2 positions for us, 2 18-month temporary positions, one for HR and one for finance, to help us work through the implementation of this. And that is absolutely huge. For the state. The state is, and everyone is in full support. This has to work. So they are committed to doing and providing every resource that they have to ensure that we get a great product. And so I can't say enough for everyone's commitment. And I think too, internally with our departments, our HR and finance departments, our teams are committed to ensuring that it works and that we get a great model for the state.
So these are 2 experienced professionals in this product, as far as who the state's providing?
The state, Glenda and I will get to select those people. So we'll be able to hire, interview and hire for those positions, or we could even contract out. We'll just get to make that decision. I've currently got mine posted and looking at our skill sets and experience and determining what's best. So I don't know who that person is right yet, and I don't believe Ms. Jones does either, but we do have the funding and the position for us.
That's good.
Are these like business analyst level subject matter experts you're looking for?
So
What's the skill set you're
Sure.
hoping to find?
So what we need are program managers for each of our departments. And rather than hiring a program manager, Glenda and I felt it was critical to have a knowledge base of the school system and our departments, the finance side and the HR side. So we'll assign someone in our department to be a program manager. They'll have the coordination and that type of experience along with our individual department experience. So when they're doing program management, somebody needs to come in behind them and fill their job and do their job for 18 months that they're going to be facilitating the program management. So we're looking for someone very specific to finance in my area and very specific to the HR function in Glenda's area. Does that make sense?
That's actually a smart way to do it, just from the standpoint of your staff members will be learning the product.
Yes.
Yeah.
So your goal is to use your program managers as the kind of like super user that helps guide people and be the question and answer person. So how does Dane's department technology work with you folks, especially when it comes to contingency planning and all with the software? Because
Every day, all day.
will he have a hard, from the technical side, will he have someone on that committee with you guys?
So far, we've included Dane, and we'll include anyone that he would like to be on the committee. After the board approves this on August 12th, assuming that you do, knock, knock, we have 3 weeks of meetings set up to go through the planning process, and so then we'll be sending invitations to all the team members, and we'll know more of what to expect on a day-to-day basis. If you looked at this statement of work, it's 102 pages long, and it's extremely detailed about the task and the time frame in which we need to accomplish that. So we'll really start the work in 3 weeks, and probably can tell you a lot more after that.
So you'll be working with other districts, and y'all will be meeting as a group during this effort?
Not as much.
Okay.
We're pretty much it. We're the pilot. We're creating the golden template. We're going to be first. So we are working with the state. We are working with Oracle, Cherry Road Oracle, and we are working with all of these other vendors, like the vendors that provides our, like Blue Cross Blue Shield. All of our flexible benefits, the substitute system that interfaces with our payroll, the little gadget system that our bus drivers go around and sign in on a daily basis and do their safety checks. All of those vendors, we're going to be working with and integrating all of those softwares together.
That's a big task.
It is.
That's
It's exciting.
That's a big deal.
Good luck.
Thanks.
And when you say working with the state, is it a single agency or subdivision of DPI, or is it several?
It's one of those really interesting ways that the
Silos of-
state does, and so it came through the governor's authority, and there's a department assigned by him, and it's called the Modernization, School Business Modernization Group, and there's a director of that. So it's not necessarily under DPI, but they work closely. DPI is also going to go through a modernization and the implementation the same time we are there, and they chose Cherry Road Oracle also. Are there any other questions?
Okay, board members, consent or action? Good for consent? Okay.
That's okay.
Okay, thank you. And next, we'll move on to 7.04 and keep Ms. Klutz here with us regarding the operational cost savings for
Yes.
teacher supplements.
Okay. Board back in June, the board gave us direction and indicated that we were going to reduce our operational savings so that we could continue and do the additional 0.5% supplement for teacher supplements that would take us from 8.5% to 9%. I was able to give you some tools and some documents in advance to assist you and start the process. Since then, we've got several questions, and we did a question and answer document that's attached. We're here to answer any questions and to help facilitate this. This is not an easy task for the board, but we are here to assist in any way that we need to. And I'll take the board's direction from here.
Okay, board members, questions, what ideas do you have? It's up to us as a board to come up with any money if we were not going to use the Beverly Hills savings. So we'll just have open floor, whoever has some ideas to share. Go ahead. Ms. Carpenter?
Well, one of the things I wanted to state, we've got it covered this year. And one of the things I think that we need to look at, we need to do this during budget time. When we're starting to look at budget for next year, like I say, we've got it covered this year. I think we need to look at this during the budget time when we're starting to look at our budget for next year. When we're looking at saying we're going to bring on additional people, or we're going to do additional things, or we're going to do, I think that's the time we need to be looking at these things and say what we're going to be doing, or what we're going to, you know, I think that's when we need to be looking at this. And I'd like to, and I know I looked at a lot of different things, like when we're looking at, and one of the things, the big thing, I mean, I think I want to thank Kelly for all the help she gave me and for the information she gave me. I mean, when we're looking at these contracts, when we're looking at all the big thing I saw, I mean, I think you've done a wonderful job, Kelly, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I mean, looking at what we've done, we've been very, very good in what we do, and you know what we try to do. And about the only thing I saw was the other operational expense. I mean, that was the only area I thought we could maybe squeeze something out of. And it was the other contracts where we put out like for, you know, painting or things like that. And there again, those are contract amounts that we put out RFQs for, or put out, and we just have to look at that when those things come in. Maybe try to see if we can get lower prices on that. And again, a lot of that stuff is done when we're looking at budget, and that's what I'm referring to. When we start our budget process, we look at saying, well, gee, are we really going to need that person? Or let's just say we're not going to maybe hire that or not do that at budget time when we go through our budget process. And like I say, we've got this year covered. So that's what that's just a suggestion I'm making. I'd like to hear from my other board members. I came over and Kelly was very helpful. And again, Kelly, I want to thank you very much for your help and information you gave me.
Okay, so I guess I'm a little bit concerned about the board pushing it to the committee to find the money, and it has to be recurring, not one-year contracts. So I don't know, what do you think?
I do want to clarify, Ms. Carpenter, we did look at those operational expenses in the other category that she's talking about. And just so we're all on the same page, that was specifically in the maintenance area. And so the county has put restrictions on the maintenance area. So even if we could save the money in the contracts, maybe we can, maybe we can't, not sure today, but I believe the county is going to tell us, well, you can use that money for other maintenance products, but you can't use it for teacher supplements. Now, that's just my belief based on the way that we've operated. I'm not telling the board that they can't ask the commissioners to do that, but I need to advise you that that's how we've operated in the past, and my understanding is that you can't move that money.
And it's two different buckets.
It is.
It's a capital for the, is the maintenance, some of it considered capital, or?
The money that she's talking about that we looked at is an operating expense. It is a reoccurring operating expense, but it is a separate, when they give it to us, they give it to us in a separate pot of money, and they monitor it every year, and we are not allowed to, if you don't spend $10 of that money, you have to reappropriate it the next year. So we can't even use the carryover for a different purpose. It's very designated.
So I was under the impression, and I don't know if this is a correct assumption or not, that we needed to find it out of what I'll call labor operating expense, which would entail things like the locally paid positions and whatnot, as far as canceling out some of those, which would mean not necessarily people losing their jobs, but the resources that they provided to schools wouldn't be there. That it needed to be in that kind of labor operating.
Well, that is a caution that I would give you. If we're delaying this to budget cycle, one of the things that you do have the luxury of doing if you're cutting the budget, and I say luxury lightly, is that, you know, we've always in Cabarrus County protected against RIF situations. We've not had to lay off people in situations where the budget changes, and that's what we want to protect against. With this type of lead amount of time, you could probably make some decisions and you would have a significantly less impact on people, because what you would do is take vacant positions rather than terminating somebody's current employment. And that has worked for us in the past, and that's one of the reasons that I tell you you need fund balance, is because when decisions are made, you have the luxury of doing it more humankind, right? If somebody has to leave employment, you can give that time to vacate out naturally through attrition rather than just coming in and just terminating positions. So that would be my concern about waiting till the budget cycle, because we don't finalize the budget recommendation to the board until April. And so if you made that decision then you would be riffing positions. The board would then have to make a decision to terminate positions for on July 1st. You couldn't carry those positions beyond July 1st.
So, Madam Chair, I have a question. Yeah. So, I also felt like we should have pushed it out. I think we discussed this in one of the last meetings that I was talking about that, because how do we do this before we even know what the state approves? So, to me, that's another challenge that we have in knowing they haven't approved their budget, so ours is really not finalized yet. I just feel like we're kind of putting the cart before the horse on that as well.
So the majority of, I'd venture to say, I'm guessing right now, but 90+% of the state budget, you don't have flexibility in any way. This board does not have flexibility. You do, if they give me a teacher position, you can't say that we're not going to hire that teacher position.
Let me interrupt you just for a moment. But now, they really haven't decided on raises, the supplements, you know, any of that piece of it either, correct?
Correct.
So how do we guess what that's going to actually ultimately be if we're going to try to set something hard on our end without knowing what they're doing on their end yet?
Help me understand how that impacts our
Supplements are all
local budget.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm saying like state raises and that type of thing that usually feeds into ours.
Yeah, so the state raises that come down, so when the state, let's just make up a number and say the state gives everybody a 3% raise, the state also sends the money down for the 3% raise. So it doesn't impact our local budget.
So with that being said, if that is all decided and supplements are on ours, we do it this year out of operational savings, which is already taking care of the fund balance, but we try to pull it from wherever. Moving forward, how do we know how to pull that from the same place that we're going to continue to pull it for? Because every year we're going to have to account for that, right?
So if you're, just take for example, you're vacating positions, that's reoccurring money, and so that money would be there every year. So you make the decision one time, as long as it's reoccurring money. If you take it out of fund balance, that's not, right? So that's why we're saying you can't do that for multiple years. You can't take it out of something like capital, because that's one-time money. So you have to have a reoccurring source.
That, I think we're not on the same page. So
Okay.
what I'm saying is,
well, help me.
Yeah, I know. You know, you and I had that discussion about a lot of the times you have operational savings. And that's how our fund balance increases. Right. And that's how it gains momentum if it increases. How do we know where those are coming from each year to be able to say, okay, this year we're going to do better in X department or wherever you normally get the gain from? How do we know that going forward each year? I mean, I get it that the position, if we use those, once they're vacated, they're done. But how do you know where that's coming from every year? When you said, well, we've increased out of operational savings each year, that's how our fund balance has increased.
Right.
How do we know that, where that's coming from each year?
We don't.
But then how do we know where to pull that from?
So the savings is what increases the fund balance, and those are erratic and unpredictable. So that could be, just give you an example. So our utilities is about a $5 million budget line item. If we've got a mild winter, just 10% of that, if we do okay, is $500,000, right? But think about if you have a harsh winter and it goes the other way. So I'm budgeting about $5 million, and I'm hoping it's going to be a mild winter, and I'm hoping I'm going to pocket $500,000. And if I do, it goes in my fund balance, right? And you guys can do things with it. If I don't, and that's going to happen as much as it goes one way, it's going to go the other. I have to find $500,000, and generally that's out of fund balance, where I make that happen, where I balance that. So I have no idea what our winters are going to be. And just, there's a lot of examples like that, but that's probably the best one that most people at home can understand, is that's how that money gets in there. A personal example from my department, I had a person go on maternity leave. And so sometimes they're on sick leave, and sometimes there's a payment related to that, and sometimes they're not on sick leave, right? They don't have any because there may be a new employee. And so there may be 2 months of I call it lap salary or vacant salary there, where that money can then go into fund balance. But that person came back from maternity leave, and I still have that expense. So I can't use that money over and over and over again. So
Kelly, can I do maybe a clarification? So thinking about all the budget amendments we do at the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah.
So the fund balance is all from local money, because at the end of the year, all those amendments are making sure we spend all of our state money.
Correct.
Otherwise, we lose it. We can't put state money in fund balance.
Correct. That's right.
So through those budget amendments, it becomes, I don't want to say lucrative, because that's not really the word. It's just more beneficial to us to not spend the local money and save for a rainy day or for that bad winter.
Yeah.
But I think that's where we sometimes get crossed between state budgets and local budgets, is that we can't save anything off of the state money.
No, we cannot.
So
But we have said local.
we can save local if,
Oh, yeah.
there's either,
So we
as,
have. I mean, we've increased our local fund balance by several $1 million.
oh yeah,
More so than the 700,000 we're trying to find.
but we don't know, and I'm not going to put words in Kelly's mouth here just because the phone's right beside me.
Well, I know it's unpredictable, but it's,
yeah.
if you look at the track record for the last 5 years, it's almost always a gain. And that's the same reason, because she's budgeting for a bad winter. If we don't have a bad winter, we're going to we'll have funds.
Yeah, but you can't use fund balance for operating.
Right. And
But it
those
doesn't
are,
go into fund balance until you've got the savings.
Basically, what I'm saying, instead of putting it to fund balance, you put it towards what we're trying to find, the savings.
so in that example, Rob, what you would have to, what I believe you're saying or suggesting to me is that we take our Duke Power budget and I adjust it from $5 million, I adjust it down to $4.5 million. Then I take $500,000 and I move it over into teacher supplements. I think that's what I heard you say. Is that correct?
Well, I guess that's kind of what I'm saying.
Okay, so if we do that, and we do not have a mild winter this winter, and next winter,
Then we'll have a smaller fund balance.
and for the next 10 winters,
Well, if it's 10 winters in a row, correct.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand him.
It has not happened in the last 5 years. It's maybe one of those winters was a bad winter, the rest are not. So,
I can't, I'm sorry, I can't understand.
again, just looking at it,
Can you repeat that, Rob? I'm holding the phone up.
I'm just looking at the fund balance from 2016, unassigned was $6 million, 2017 is $7 million, and 2018 is $10 million. So that's well over $1 million a year. So we're having those mild winters. Even if we have a tough winter, we're still not going to drop back to the $6 million.
So I just need to say to the board, as my fiscal responsibility as a CFO of this district, that if the board decides to use fund balance for a reoccurring expense, I'm going to ask that you individually, take a vote, because I can't be responsible for that in a legal position, Mr. Shaw.
We didn't suggest using the fund balance, we suggested taking the budgeted amount and reducing the utilities.
I guess I
So
need
we're gonna
clarification though before we even go any further. So I'm not talking about just utilities. That's not the only place.
No, it's not the
I
only
mean,
place.
that's just one of several that you have.
The other
savings.
example that I mentioned for staff, so
Right.
that kind of thing.
So
But I
my-
can't,
right.
I can't guarantee that when a teacher goes out or a staff member goes out on maternity leave or FMLA, that they are or not going to have leave or are going to have to go off on or off payroll. Those are things that I don't know, I can't predict. And then to not budget an appropriate amount for what I'm expecting the expense to come in feels fiscally irresponsible to me. If I know my Duke Power bill is on average $5 million a year, and I cut it to $4.5 million, and I don't have an answer for how I'm going to pay that $5 million, it just feels fiscally irresponsible.
I know we're having a very serious conversation about real dollars, but this is getting so absurd to have to budget according to the Farmer's Almanac. I mean, you can't predict that kind of thing, so you get a safe, comfortable amount, and then we cross our fingers about the weather and the conditions that we face. I mean, you've got a long track record of budgeting the right amounts, and I don't understand why we're having this conversation about things that we're doing wisely from prior experience, but which we can't really predict in the future. We're struggling to find cost savings, and everything is so tight or so unpredictable that I'm not sure what we can actually come up with. I don't mean to be facetious. I'm just trying to say that we don't know what the weather is going to be for that particular line item. And so the amount that you have in there and have built up over the years has probably been a very safe cushion over the years.
And for a budget, you as the CFO need to know that the money's available on day one of the fiscal year. You can't wait and see where it might float from.
Right.
You would have to budget the supplement in there.
Yes, I do.
With whatever knowledge you have
Right.
when that budget is being created.
Right. And that's why I said what I did the way that I did, is there's a general statute that says I can't pay anything that I don't have budgeted. And so there is a part of that, and I might be reading a little bit into it, but Mr. Shaw can tell me, is if I disapprove an expenditure and the board approves an expenditure, then the board then shall take a vote, and whomever approves that expenditure is then personally responsible. I cannot, in good faith, tell you to, cannot agree to take it out of fund balance, a reoccurring expense, and have my name attached to it. It's just not the right thing to do. It's just not fiscally responsible. So if this board makes that decision, I'll ask that there be a vote, and I not be held responsible.
For one time, not for reoccurring.
And that's not the suggestion.
We couldn't understand you, Rob.
The suggestion on the table was not to take it out of fund balance.
No, the first year is coming out of fund balance because that's a one-time event, and we've already approved that. We're talking about tonight, where do we get the money ongoing? When we took the previous vote, we said on August 12th, we would vote to where we get the money from.
Right. So I thought the discussion was lowering one of the utility accounts or something similar.
No, I mean, there's not really discussion on that. I think what Ms. Klutz is telling us is that's not fiscally responsible when she knows what the average bills are. It's what, I'm sorry?
That doesn't add up then.
Can you clarify what doesn't add up?
If that was the case, if we're budgeting and spending exactly what we're planning, our fund balance would be increasing several $1 million a year. So we're budgeting and not spending what we're budgeting and putting that into savings.
There's multiple things that factor into your fund balance every year. I'm just trying to provide you a couple of examples. And so, I mean, there's...
That's all we're doing here is looking at that, that's all.
So Kelly, let's take this down a little bit different road. So if we're talking about the operational savings from Beverly Hills, okay, if we use all of that money, close that school, use all of that money for the supplement, that operational savings continues to reoccur every year for that school, even though it's gone? Okay.
Yes.
So what do we do to refurbish that school or repurpose it, which was the plan? Where does that money come from?
So there's a lot of directions that can go down, and so we would be waiting on the board to give us direction on what you wanted to do or how you wanted to repurpose it. The things that have been mentioned, and obviously the board has not made a decision. There's a lot of conversation that would have to happen, but the one thing that I do recall us talking about is a teaching and learning center or offices.
But where does that money come from
and
after we have repurposed that money?
So what I understand is that the old part of the Beverly Hills building would be torn down, so there's the majority of the expense associated with it, and it's just left would be the smaller section, the newer section. So there would be some operational cost associated with that. Not sure what that would be, because the board hasn't given us direction on what you want to do with that. So that's a possibility, right? There's also the possibility, again, the board can go down any road you want to go. There's a lot of tentacles there. But we could give that building back to the county, and then that could be their concern, or they could do whatever they wanted to with it. And so we've also talked to the county, and we asked that the county not take, if you do close and vacate that building, would you agree to not take those savings back from us? And they agreed not to. So there's just a lot of unknowns, because we don't necessarily know the direction that the board wants to take.
Well, I feel like this item is before the discussion of the capital plan, and I feel like we need to have that discussion before we can finish this discussion. I'm not really sure why we're having this discussion.
Well, that's the beauty of the work session, though, is we're not making a decision tonight.
Right.
So we can go to the capital plan discussion, keeping this in our minds as we're going through it. And I was just going to comment, if using that teacher, what'd you call it, training learning center? Kind of idea?
Teaching and learning center.
Teaching learning center. Using that concept, it would not require all the specific personnel that we staff at a normal school.
But we would still have to know what that number is if we're doing anything with that school.
Yeah, and typically...
And we would need to know exactly what it is, because I would not vote for something not knowing what we're doing. Number one, it's frustrating to have all these unknowns and try to make a decision tonight.
Well, we're not deciding.
Well, I don't mean tonight, but we have to make it for Monday night, which I'm not so sure between now and Monday what's really going to change unless we get a true capital improvement plan and know what the funding sources are.
So I'm just going to use the example in the past, because you remember some of these, Holly. When we started the PLC concept, I think you were chair then, actually, when we started that, we asked the county, that was a reuse of a previous building, and we asked them for whatever that dollar amount was to seed the program, to start it, and to maintain it. And the county funded that as a separate, based on the concept and what we would be doing there. They did the same thing with the Glenn Center when we converted it into some offices and a small school concept. They funded that. So they fund, those are much smaller recurring money spaces. And that's what I would expect. I mean, I was just kind of using that thought process myself. Does that sound reasonable?
It does, and then I can help, because the numbers are already laid out here in front of me. As Ms. Furtenbaugh said, the positions that we had already calculated were 438,000. So you will continue to get those savings if you repurpose it for a teaching and learning center or an offices. So those duplicate positions would save you still 438,000. The only question here that I have is I would have to go back and look to see the utility bills and take and divide that on, is that smaller building 20% of the square foot, or is it 50% of the square foot? I don't know the answer to that, and I would have to calculate that for you. Obviously, a newer building is going to be more efficient than the older. I'm trying to look at my maintenance guys, and they're not helping me at all. But I'm still trying. Anyway, what we calculated for savings for utilities, routine maintenance, and insurance was $119,000. So you wouldn't recoup 100% of that, but you would recoup some of that. So I can't give you a definite. I can tell you the 438 would be there, and a part of the 100 would be there.
Okay, so, and also, the monies that we, or I guess y'all, last year, had for operational budget for Royal Oaks.
Okay.
So that number has to be less because it's not used at full capacity this year, so there's got to be a savings there, correct? What did you allocate for operational savings since it's not up and running completely?
So remember we had Royal Oaks was already an existing facility.
No, I
correct?
mean the new school.
I'm sorry?
I mean the new school.
So as far as the expense was associated, so we had an existing facility of Royal Oaks that had, I don't know how many of our students, a smaller amount of students. What we did was take that school down and then rebuild a new school. And so when I asked for, when I ask for new money for Hickory Ridge Elementary, I'm going to ask for the entire utility bill. I'm going to ask for the maintenance of that. I'm going to ask for all those things because it's a brand new facility. We don't have students going there yet. Royal Oaks was a replacement school, so I only asked for the increase in utilities from a 400 student school to an 800 student school. And so, but there's an economies of scale and an efficiency. We're still running that entire, again, I'm looking at my maintenance department. We are still running heating and air conditioning in that entire building. We're still lighting the same square footage. We're still cleaning. We're still doing a lot of the things that we would do whether that school has 400 or 600 in it.
But we don't have full staff there, and we don't have the rest of those components.
Right, and so when we talked about savings, operational savings, we didn't include any of the savings for the teacher or those staff, but only the duplicated staff that would not be duplicated is how we got those savings. So we didn't calculate costs for the teachers that would go with the students.
So duplicated is like nurse, assistant principal, that kind of thing?
Right. Treasurer, power school, duplicated, media, school nutrition manager. You don't have but one of those type things.
Okay, so other questions, comments on this topic? And it is, I agree, it's like a cart before the horse, but you have to have the whole picture, which is the beauty of a work session, that we can kind of be thinking about this while we're thinking about the next. But we did previously say that we would decide at April 12th where that money came from in the future. So if we delay, I suggest August, yeah, I'm going to say April. It was an A month, you know. So we will, I think, if we decide as a board not to vote next week on operational savings, then we need to kind of set some parameters about what we would do. I fear waiting for the budget. I wasn't thinking as complicated down the line as you were thinking, Kelly, but just from the standpoint of keep pushing it off. You know, sometimes the hard decisions are better to peel the Band-Aid off and move on. So,
Cindy?
Yes.
I don't want to weigh in on one side or the other, but Kelly had mentioned a couple times about the board attorney and obligations of the finance officer and obligations of the board. I understood Kelly is saying that you know, she has to make sure there's money in the budget, and she can't approve any expenditure and pay anything unless there's money in the budget and it's backed up. And finance officers are always going to be conservative, and they should be, because they have to look for the worst-case scenario. And the general rule is you certainly don't want to build in a new expense without having some sort of revenue. You don't want to have a continuing depletion of your fund balance, because then you're going to be in terrible shape. 1 year you can do it, maybe 2 years you can do it, and after a while you don't have enough money. I think what Rob is saying is that he's seeing a practice of our fund balance increasing, and raised the question of, do we have a structural surplus actually built into our fund balance on our budgets? And the answer to that is, who knows? I mean, it depends on year by year by year by year. And the finance officer has to look for the worst case scenario, and then it's up to the board to determine what sort of risk is available. And if you make the wrong decision, we have some fund balance, or do we actually have to do a RIF at some point? And so I don't have an answer to that solution, but I do want to say that the finance officer certainly has to make sure that she doesn't want to build anything that's going to cause the fund balance to decrease. And she certainly, by law, is not going to put herself personally in any jeopardy of paying anything that's not funded. Now, you're not there.
Amen.
You got a lot of things before you get there, but she just wants to highlight that to the board.
Is there a law that says what the minimum fund balance has to be?
No.
No, there isn't, and there's a great debate. Some county commissioners say commissioners say should have zero fund balance, because you can always look to the county. And that's generally not popular with school boards and finance officers. Counties, I think, need an 8% fund balance. In school boards, there's no particular requirement. And it's an assessment, I'm sorry?
Is that 8% the full fund balance, or is it broken into these different categories?
That would be, see, that's the county commissioners. So I don't know how you calculate theirs. School boards, when we look at the percentage, you generally look at having money available for everything, because, like, for example, you may get federal funding, but you may not get it a couple months later. So you need your local fund balance for liquidity to help meet expenditures in your federal funds.
Could I just add, for perspective, for you guys to understand our fund balance, we have less than 3% of our budget in our fund balance. So while our budget's a big number, we're a big district, but we're only carrying less than 3%. Now, you've got to look at those in different ways, the different funds, operating, capital, those type things. And so if you include capital, you're less than 3%. If you exclude capital, you're 3.48%, something like that. So you're on average, you're 3%. And so you think about that in a family, in a two-person family income, and if just assuming you make $100,000, the two, individuals contributing to that family, that means they would have $3,000 in their savings account to combat anything that's unexpected or unknown, right? And so when we look at our fund balance, sometimes it looks like a big number because our budget is a big number. But 3%, guys, that's not a big number as far as a safety net.
Jerry, what is the number?
So it's restricted or unrestricted is about $10 million.
What is the 3% number that you're talking about?
So our budget is generally $350 million to $400 million. Okay, so you take capital out of that, and it's a little less, which then makes your percentage a little higher if you include capital in that. And so what I would call to your attention is that when there are state cuts, this board is the one that makes the RIFs. This board is the one that makes the decisions. The state doesn't make those decisions. When there are federal cuts, this board makes those decisions. And when there are local decisions, this board makes those decisions. While So you can say, you can look at it just on a local perspective because it comes out of the local fund, but our obligation is for all of those funds. And I'm just going to go one step further, and I know you want to say something, Barry. But we also have to keep in mind our child nutrition and our Kids Plus fund, because through my 20 years of experience here, there were years that those were my most difficult, most concerning funds that I knew that I was going to have to bail out. So that's not the case now, but those are funds that you as a board are responsible for. So you need to include those in the calculation. So you're looking at reality, you're 3% or less of what you're obligated to in your savings account.
So,
Can I ask you a question, Kelly? So the state budget decision where the teachers, the 80 teachers that we had, how much was that? What does that equate to? Or in other words, when
That was $4 million, you know, I mean, that's a round number. But
right. So
about-
just to give a couple examples. So we are clearly in a crazy budget year right now in the state. We're at the beginning of August, and it doesn't look like we're going to get a budget anytime soon. So we're looking at, you know, it could be October or November. And what happened in that last kind of crazy budget year is all of a sudden in July we had a decision that 80 teachers were going to be cut. So if we don't have $5 million in a fund balance, then 80 teachers lose their job. And so what Kelly did in that decision was figure out a way over 4 years not to eliminate those jobs. But if that same decision came down today, the $10 million would be $5 million, right? And so that's one decision in 1 year that just happened in 2016, right? So that's one example. We just had a large district meeting 2 weeks ago. We just spent a long time with the superintendent of New Hanover. Now, obviously, they're at the beach, but he will tell you that when there's a natural disaster, when you have a hurricane, the difference in starting repairing those schools is I went to my fund balance and I called somebody and they started working on it the next day. And then we'll figure out how over the next year the insurance will pay that back. The groups that don't have a fund balance, they don't start working on the school. So budget decision, $5 million, it's in half. Hurricane decision, there's the rest of the money in 1 year. Anything that is unforeseen, we are self-insured for workman's comp. 1 or 2 catastrophic injuries, you go beyond what we have. So it's not craziness by any stretch to say that you could eliminate the entire fund balance with a few disasters. Now, we certainly hope that doesn't happen, and Rob is right that over the last couple of years you've been able to do that. But I would say, think about the context of what Kelly said, which is the county says to run a county, you're mandated to have 8%. And so we don't even have half of that to run the district. And so, again, that number sounds like a lot of money until you start talking about teachers losing jobs and catastrophes. And so that's the way that you can say, we're going to fix the school and we're going to make sure people don't get fired and figure it out. If you don't have those, literally the next day, you have a whole different school system. And so it's not to paint the bleak picture of that. It's just to say, when you are the second largest employer in the county, in the 8th largest school district in the state, that number is not as big as it seems, as she said. It is the only way that you can ensure people that you can operate regardless of what comes up, because yes, you had 2 or 3 good years. You could obviously have the next 5 to be 5 very bad years, and suddenly you don't have a fund balance. And so, again, we're not trying to paint a bleak picture. We're just trying to say, go back to that context of 3% in a $400 million budget is not a lot of money to account for a really bad year where 3 or 4 things pop up. So
one more thing that's critical in the fund balance is my cash flow. So the federal dollars don't come down till October, November. And so my cash flow for my maintenance account. So we want to start on July 1st because students aren't in school. We want to get as many as the repairs done in advance. That allotment comes in 1/12 increments, and so I'm spending at a rate that I can't afford in July and August in the maintenance department. But I have plenty of money budgeted, and I have plenty of cash flow available. Same thing with our federal funds, and so those are 2 really big funds, Title I and EC. So I am having to float and I hate to pull a number off the top of my head, but it's in excess of $3 million and probably close to $5 million. So without a fund balance, I can't float our federal cash. This board would then have some other decisions to make because I would not have the money there to do it.
Let me just add. Let me just add.
Okay, Mr. Shaw wanted to say
I'm sorry,
something.
didn't want to cut off Mr. Walter. I was just going to say that there's no right answer, there's no legal answer for school boards as opposed to counties. Counties have 8%, but you'll usually see counties, they'll have different sizes. And the smaller the county sometimes have bigger fund balances because they don't have as much to work with. Larger counties might have smaller, but they're more in the range of 20% very frequently, 18%, whatever. As long as there's no legal requirement, then it's a political decision, and I don't mean that negatively. I mean boards make those decisions, putting all the factors together with advice of their finance officer, and the finance officer will always be and should be conservative on that. And boards have to be very careful to disregard. If they're going to disregard the advice of the finance officer, they want to have thought it through very well. I would say we represent a number of school districts, and this is what I wanted to add, was that 3% would be considered small as amount of fund balance.
Well, Madam Chair, I think that's why I would just like to say, I think it's very important that we have this combined board meeting so that the commissioners understand, and it's not just words, it's numbers, and it's black and white, and everybody on each side decides or knows what these decisions are. I just wish we could have had that meeting prior to some of these discussions.
Well, but we have to get our ducks in the row. The commissioners have agreed, and we did have one date set, and we're now working on some alternate dates. But keep in mind, the money for the second half of the percent is our decision. The commissioners aren't giving us that money. They gave the first half, recurring into the future, into the continuation budget. So we have to decide this. Yes, the commissioners and the capital plan will be an important discussion, and they're very willing to meet with us. We just have to, we need to have our capital plan that we plan to take forward with, which we'll have as the next topic here, to take forward to them, because they want to talk their finances and what we're asking for and see how those line up. And right now it's not sound like anything's going to line up very well, but yes, they're very, very willing to talk about that, but it's not about operating money. So.
Well, it's not, but the capital improvement plan, whatever gets agreed upon there is what feeds into what we do with our operational savings plan as well.
I guess somewhat it could, but I don't know.
It will. That will make a big decision on what we decide to do. I mean,
yeah, but not for the savings. I don't see how it would affect the savings.
It will involve Beverly Hills Elementary School totally and completely.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So from that standpoint. Yeah. Okay, so Mr. Shoemaker?
Madam Chair, yeah, I would like to say a couple things. First, I have a scenario. If we stay flat on enrollment this year, and our class sizes, of course, at the K-3 level are going to decrease, but we have to do it with the same number of teachers, would that force us to have to RIF some teachers because, you know, we've increased the number of class sizes, we've increased the number of classes, and that's what got us into the 2016 debacle where we had to, you know, support close to 80 positions for, you know, almost 4 million for, I think it's been 3 years. We tried to grow our way out of it.
Right.
But at the same time, they're decreasing class sizes, but saying, oh, by the way, when we decrease the class sizes at K-3, we're not allowing you to increase your teacher population. So 4 and 5 and up get hit with the, you know, the larger class sizes and that thing. Would that be something realistic? If we had flat enrollment, would we end up being in a position where we might be in the same position we were in 2016 with at least a few jobs?
So I think I understand your question, but we'll see here in just a minute. So in this situation, when they're lowering class size, now when we first started this endeavor and down this road, the state did not plan on giving us any teachers to then decrease class size.
Right.
And so that was a problem, and we were going to be increasing class size and doing all kinds of things to make that work. But now the state has agreed to give us the teachers. So
Okay.
as the class size decreases over 4 years, they are also giving us those teachers.
Okay.
So that situation is different on a positive note.
Good. Well, so that leads me to the next question.
Okay.
Even though we were putting away close to, Rob asserts that we put away a close couple $1 million a year. At the same time, we were spending out $3 to $4 million since 2016 to support those 80 positions that we were trying to grow out of. Is that true?
We have also, our class sizes in 3 through 12 have been more than we want them to be. And so we have been correcting that situation over the last couple of years. I hate to even say this, but I'm gonna make an estimate. So as I look at our fund balance this year, the year end closed June 30th, and we haven't finalized, we haven't even started audit. We won't finalize until October. We're looking more of a break-even situation. And break-even to me, if you're $100,000 on one side or $100,000 on the other side, is pretty much break-even when you got a $350, $400 million budget. So we have made decisions to put teachers in classrooms because we were more comfortable with our fund balance. As we saw it growing over the last couple of years, we felt good enough to put some more teachers in the classroom. So I don't anticipate the fund balance to continue to increase.
I think I can speak to that just for a second. So I think to get to what Mr. Shoemaker is asking is the same point, is when you have a healthy fund balance and we grew some more students than we thought, or we look at that and say, we don't want 5th grade classes to be over 30, we don't want them at 32, then when you have a healthy fund balance, we can say, you know what, go ahead and assign 6 more teachers out so we can make sure that all of our elementary classes are below 30. But when that fund balance is tighter, then you can't do that anymore, and suddenly your classes are at 32. So it's kind of the same question, is that it may not mean that people are necessarily terminated. It just means now we don't have the flexibility to say, because Kelly and Glenda and I sit down and look at that and basically say, well, what are we comfortable with? Yes, we can assign 5 teachers, and part of that is because we're growing. As soon as we're not growing, that luxury is much less, and the tighter that is, then you say, now I can't go ahead and alleviate that. Now I have to move the teacher from this side of the county to that side of the county because it's going to make it bigger. So we can assign that a little bit better, and we feel good about that because we have a fund balance that's okay. If you make that fund balance 2% or 1%, we can't make that decision anymore. The only other thing, and you tell me if I'm wrong, is that the state's plan to fund those extra teachers that she said is actually a 4-year plan. So they really only funded 2 years of that. So they funded half of the need for that. It'll take 2 more years before we get there. So we kind of make up the difference locally to that until the state does it. Or if the state has a decline, then guess what? They won't fund the rest of those 2 years, right? And so it is good news that Kelly said they're halfway there, but we got to have 2 more years before that money's actually in place.
So, I'm sorry.
Yeah, until we get there, we're kind of floating those, or we're making classes bigger. Those are the only options.
So to Dr. Louder's point, I want to make sure I understand that. So if you're using fund balance to allow us to do that with those classrooms, increase it, how do we treat that the next year for reoccurring funds?
So it's not necessarily using fund balance. It's tightening up our state allotment. So if the state gives us, just say 1,000 positions, right? And so I can allocate right now, knowing that I have a fund balance, I'll allocate all 1,000, and Glenda will be happy. When something happens and I have to, just say a teacher resigns and her retirement date is effective October the 1st or September the 1st, rather than in a traditional calendar year, I can make a decision to, I'm going to pay that teacher that's retiring because she's entitled to that, right? And you don't want to kick her out before the school year starts because she's entitled to that. But I don't want to sub in that classroom on day one when the students arrive. So I can make a decision to do that. So I'm doubling up on some of my teaching allotments. So what I'm doing is just pulling that state allotment really tight, where otherwise it would make me uncomfortable and I wouldn't do it unless I had fund balance. But the fact that I have a net, I can pull it really, really tight. And then I'm not scraping any money out of state at the end of the year, and I'm not putting it into fund balance. And so that's what happened this year, is I tightened it up pretty tight. And then as you can, well, as I said, you'll be able to tell when our audit comes out, is that things were a lot tighter this year. So we didn't put much if any into fund balance.
I think I understand that regarding that situation, but let's go back to if we lessen the classroom size, as he stated, instead of having 32, we took it down to 30 and we added 6 additional teachers. And you pulled that out of that. Are you talking about that same?
So that's a timing situation is all that is. And so if the three of us sit down and talk about this every week before school, and when Dr. Louder says, you know, this is too big, these classrooms are too tight, I say, okay, well, will 5 do it, right? Can 5 teachers fill this and make you guys feel good about that? If that does, what I'm going to do the very next year when we grow 20 positions, I'm going to automatically pull 5 off, because it's just so it's a 1-year timing thing that I can go back and forth and I can feel comfortable about, because they want me.
There's so much guess in our budget. Is what makes it so difficult. Is we're saying, I think that's tight enough, we can do it. And if we're wrong and we don't grow it, then now we're $250,000 in the hole. But because we have a fund balance, we can make that work. But we'll have to make it up next year. A growing district helps for that when we're wrong. As soon as we're not growing, now we have a $250,000 deficit. The guess is even harder. And so we're just constantly trying to say, yep, I'm comfortable with that. Again, because I have $10 million. If I have $1 million, I'm not comfortable of losing $250, because now we can't take any type of emergency. And so it just gives us the flexibility to say, yep, we can pay for that. When we don't have that much money, then you can't say we can pay for it anymore. Now there is no flexibility. And again, back to that 3% of 400, there's not much flexibility in there before you're in trouble. And it really is the most difficult part of running the school system, I would say, is that we're just guessing for so much, and then about the 20th, 40th day of school, it's not a guess anymore. But until that point, it's a guess. And in a growing district, even the 40th day of school, well, now we've got more kids on the 60th day of school than we had on the 40th, and no money for them. Well, how do we pay for those kids and teachers to teach them? Fund balance, right, till we get to the next year. And so it's just the difference in being able to say, yep, I'm comfortable making that decision, or saying, wow, we have no flexibility here. We have to either terminate people or not add teachers to the classroom.
Ms. Klutz, would you remind us just the last 3, 4, 5 audit ratings your office has been given? Just toot your horn, go on, I don't care. Just tell us how well your crystal ball of all these finances over the last 4 or 5 years have been, because what we're listing and talking about here is a whole lot of risk, and you are a risk-averse person.
Correct.
Darn right, you know, I know that. And we're talking about pain factors, and if we squeezed here, we'd have to get ready for so many different circumstances that probably would happen. Go ahead, tell me how audit has reviewed you off and on over the last few years.
We've had clean audits, I think.
That's a nice way of putting it. But you've had excellent audits. You've had superb, superior, really strong audits, haven't you?
Yes, we have. Thank you.
Well, that's a testament, isn't it, to your knowledge of all these items that we're talking about here, and how painful it would be to actually go through some of these options where the risk really would be exponential if we actually took some of these steps. You've got a great track record, is what I'm saying.
I
And your
believe my
and your
job is-
advice ought to be paid attention to here.
I believe my job is to protect the board in the financial sense, and that's what I'm trying to do.
The other thing I'll just say is, again, this is, it is a topic that's talked about all over the state, and counties ask questions, and, everything that's been asked here tonight are good questions, of, well, what do we have flexibility? And when you see a number like $10 million, it does look like a lot of money until you compare it to $400 million. And then it's not that much money, right, or flexibility. And so, again, the whole idea is for everybody to understand that these decisions are being made all the time. And we've had a similar conversation what we've had tonight with the county, where with the county manager and with the finance manager for the county to ultimately say, look, we can spend the whole fund balance tomorrow. It wouldn't be hard. And with a $400 million budget, we can spend it tomorrow. We can add 160 teachers to classrooms this year, and it's gone. But I don't think anybody wants us to do that. I don't think the county wants us to do that. I don't think the board wants us to do that. So understanding what we have the flexibility for and how it helps us make decisions really is helpful to everybody, because until you've done it, you don't really quite understand, well, how do you have that flexibility? Well, the fund balance gives you part of that. So again, just the more everybody understands it, I really think the better the decisions are. So,
Ms. Carpenter?
All right, 2 questions. Well, yeah, kind of, sort of. The first question, you had mentioned about the spots that were already open right now that aren't filled, because we talked about waiting, you said, no, we can't wait to do the budget. But can we get what spots are open right now that hadn't been filled, so we could look at that? Yeah, she could do that, whoever, whatever. Get those before so we can look at that, so what dollars we're looking at with that. Second of all, what Rob was talking about. I know you don't want to say, okay, I don't want to say I'm going to take that electric bill, whatever. Is there a way to say, okay, can we utilize that if it was a mild winter, that dollar amount, and apply it to that? If we did have a overage amount that we could utilize and say, we are going to use that for the supplement if it's available. If not, then we can't use it. Is there a way to utilize it that way? Okay. Instead of saying, we definitely, what I'm saying, instead of you saying, I'm definitely going to do that.
Sure.
If there is, to protect you, protect us, instead of doing it that way. Okay. If there is that, instead of, I know where you're coming from. I did accounting all my life, and I know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. But instead of saying to put it in there to say we're definitely doing it that way, saying if there is overage in that line item number, blah, 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 whatever it is, that we would utilize it for that. Okay. If not, then we won't.
Okay, so I think I understand your question.
Where I'm coming from.
So let me restate it.
Okay.
In my words.
In your words.
So what, are you suggesting that with the county approved supplement, the supplement would go to 8.5%? And we're going to do 9 this year because we're going to do it out of fund balance. The following year, we would then have to evaluate our expenses from the prior year and determine whether funds were available before we could continue the 9% supplement for teachers. And if the excess funds were available, we would continue at 9%, and if the excess funds were not available, we would drop back down to 8.5%. Is that what I'm hearing?
If we could get it out of that account, if not, we would look at, but that would be one area we would look at. That, you're saying, you say normally, you say 500 is what you usually.
No, I didn't say normally. Please don't think I said normally. I said, if you had a mild winter, a 10% is just, that's $500,000. But we don't have a mild winter every year, and I wouldn't be a betting person on that. So I guess if you're suggesting that we,
Could you get it for the last, I mean, could you give us what it's looked like for the last 4 years possibly?
sure.
Yeah, give me a comparison for the last, what we've seen in that utility the last 4 years.
Keep in mind, we're adding properties next year, which will be in continuation money, but we don't know what those bills will really be yet.
Well,
Until
hopefully
we're-
they're going to be better, because hopefully we've got energy efficient buildings. So
Yeah,
I would
hopefully
hope
better-
they would be better.
Yeah, better per square foot, we just don't know yet.
But
Okay, board
obviously,
members,
utilities rise every year too, and so,
yeah.
so sometimes we go back to the county and ask for those utility rate increases, and sometimes we don't. So we didn't this past year, but it just depends.
Okay. So I would like to suggest we take a brief recess before we start the capital plan, because that could go on for a bit, Mr. Schultz. So we will recess now. It's 8:10, and I'm going to ask you to be back in 7 minutes. 8:17, we're back on mic. Okay, we are back from our brief recess, and we will continue with agenda item 7.05, the capital plan. Mr. Schultz and Mr. Louder.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Dr. Louder, Ms. Furtenbaugh, members of the board. Thanks for this opportunity to discuss the capital plan with you. I have to say I did have a little bit of anxiety back in June when it was proposed to present the revised capital plan in August. But it actually did me a huge favor. So I do truly, earnestly thank you for that, because I have been able to get up to speed very quickly on the great work that's been done here and the great collaboration that's occurred between you all and the Board of County Commissioners to put multiple schools forward in the last few years. So so it's been great in reflection, and having been in other districts and seeing how they've done it. You all really have done a masterful job building schools for the students, and we need more. So let's continue to do that together. So what I've done, I've obviously put the word draft up there, and then this disclaimer that you'll always see on this is these are projections based on what we know right now and best guess. Tim always makes me put that in there. But it is a disclaimer. It's hard to project what the price of steel is going to be, 2 years from now. It's difficult to project wages of construction workers, those types of things. So we put those disclaimers, and this is our best estimation at it. So I threw in the goals for this work session. Review the priorities that you all provided. We did some small group meetings, and I want to thank you all for really being expeditious and responding to that. And then really we had some great discussions, great feedback. And then you all responded to some questions that I had that really lined up well and teed things up well for tonight. And I'll show you those results here in just a minute. And then for a second goal, we want to prioritize the capital projects. So it's really those projects that you looked at when we talked in our small groups. We really looked at those projects. Didn't necessarily have a ton of feedback on the priority, or no, that doesn't need to be done, or it was really like, yeah, we need to do all these things, and we've got some specific areas of focus on that. And that's really, we have to remember who our customers are in this work, the students, the family, and the development. I'm not just talking about economic development. I mean, yes, that is super important, but it's a civic development of our citizens in Cabarrus County. That's why people want to move here. That's why people want to live here. And that's why people want to raise their families here. So that is truly important. And then the third outcome that I provide is just to give the staff, and meaning the Cabarrus County Schools staff that produces this work, feedback that we need to finalize that capital plan, bring that before you, whether that be next week on the 12th or at a future date, so that we can take a vote, finalize this capital plan, and then really begin that collaborative work with the Board of County Commissioners, other elected officials that we have. And to reach the mission that we have of empowering students to build their futures. So you may have seen this before. These are the priorities defined that we look at when we develop a capital plan. There's 7 priorities. You all suggested a couple of others, and we'll look at those as well as the funding, the age of existing facilities, functionality, school capacity, land availability, school boundaries, and feeder patterns and growth projections. And we really felt it was important to briefly define what those mean to us when we put those in, because people can define those very differently. So we did take the time to discuss that with you and what all those priorities really mean in terms of when we put those into the final development of the capital plan. So in our small group sessions, you rank ordered those 7 priorities that we just looked at. You rank ordered, surprisingly, not really, all of you is really strong consensus that funding was the priority. And so I see, through that, some goals that we have to work together collaboratively. We've got to do that with elected officials. Obviously, the county commissioners are our source of funds. We do have some, potential funds from state or federal bills that are going through, but there's no guarantee on those yet. So we do have to work collaboratively. We have to present our needs, and we have to do that in a very efficient and collaborative way. I listed some tier 2 priorities based on your feedback. So the growth projections, obviously we are a growing district, somewhere to the tune of between 400 to 600 students projected. That can always change, but we're looking at a growth around 500 for this coming year. And really we just kind of make the best projections that we can, and then hope we're close to that when it comes in, because sometimes it's just our best guesswork that we can provide. So growth projections for tier 2, age of existing facilities, and school capacities really are kind of that second tier of priorities. And then not that the tier 3 priorities aren't priorities, they are, but that's just where they fell. And you can see that functionality and land availability really tied. I think, my best guess on land availability, and you can tell me differently, is that we've been pretty successful in securing land over the last few years. And in fact, we're in negotiation process for another piece of property. So we've been advancing that pretty well, which may have also why it landed that one last on the list. So then you gave some additional priorities that we could potentially consider, and I would just ask you to consider those today as you provide feedback on this plan. The federal legislation I referred to earlier, just ensuring that we keep both larger and smaller elementary schools in mind. There is a fairly large body of research on that is really not compelling either way. And people, a lot of times will espouse, well, larger schools are better, smaller schools are better. There is a preponderance of evidence on that is really doesn't really say one is better than the other. It just kind of depends on the study that you look at. And then ensuring that purchases of mobiles is included in the 10-year plan. So that is something we'll consider as we move forward. The impact to the community, obviously, our stakeholders, repurposing of existing facilities. The person that provided that input would actually rank that as a 3, repairing versus replacing. And then would rank that as a 4, and then some verbal feedback. So based on the conversations that we had in our small group meetings, the 2 items that came up over and over again is that we have an urgency to replace downtown schools. They're some of our most aged schools, specifically Arbrow, McAllister, and Coltrane Webb, and then also there's this desire to increase the capacity of seats that we have at those schools. Those are small schools. We can, bless you, we can increase our capacity at those schools as well and relieve some of the overcrowding in some of the other areas. And lastly, again, I heard repetitively this collaboration with elected officials. And again, I think, Kate, you said it earlier about relationship with the students, but relationship with adults too goes a long way. So I appreciate you bringing that up, and that was reiterated over and over in our small group meetings. So let me do this. Let me pause right there. Any comments or questions before we move forward? Okay. Great. So The next slide you'll see is the recommended timeline. Tim is going to discuss that. I don't know that you'll see huge surprises here based on what we've covered, but we do want to go over that and point out some things as we do so. Tim?
Thank you. As you've seen this several years in a row, the timeline has stayed fairly consistent. Taking into consideration the number one priority which you had was funding. Obviously, that does affect this probably more than anything is growth and funding. Those are the two things that really push this timeline one way or the other. Currently, we are building West Cabarrus High School and Hickory Ridge. Both of those are coming in 2020. They're both going to be on time and should be with our budget and do well for us. That's going to add, quite a few seats to our district, 1,800 at the high school level and 940 at the elementary school level. And we've also been able to purchase the land for the middle school, and that's been done. So that as far as the middle school, you'll see that $54 million a couple slides down. We also are in concert right now with the county in buying a piece of property to replace Northwest Cabarrus High School. And that's going to be a land banking situation. That was one of your priorities earlier, is to make sure that land comes on by, and that should come up for purchase this year as well. So that pretty much wraps up our 2019-2020. We're also looking at purchasing some land for the Cultural Webb Elementary School, which will be necessary for us to redevelop that site to have better access and a few other things associated with that site as we go forward into 2022 for that opening in 2024. We are in the process now of obviously beginning the design of the middle school, and it will open in 2022. We were very fortunate with the county to continue to negotiate to keep that on the timeline of 2022. It did get pushed back 2 years. We negotiated that a couple years ago by building the PLC, allowed us to put that off for 2 years, but we're able to keep it on that 2-year timeline. It opens up in 2022, so we're looking forward to that. Then the next school project beyond the middle school would be the R. Brown McAllister. Right now that is scheduled for opening for 2024. It will be a larger school. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, what that school, what size it's going to be. And then the following, which is probably the biggest project we have coming down the pike, was originally scheduled for 2024. That's the opening of a replacement for Northwest Cabarrus High School. Should it be in 2024, the county's kind of wondering if they could do it till 2026. So right now we showed in our plan at 2026. And we'll talk about a little bit of concerns about that in a moment, just based on our growth projections in that area, which doesn't look too good for us in the next 2 to 4 years. Again, we got far out in the future, 24, 2026. The Cultural Web, we'll talk about that in a moment, why 24, 20, or 26 is the timeline on that one, because they both could be built concurrently if we did acquire property for that. And let's go, we're going through into the Cultural Web, and then our reuse projects. We're talking about reuse. Those are things that will come available to us between 23 and 26, depending on what facilities we can build or replace, and what we would do with that remaining school to repurpose that for some other use of the school system. And then 2019, 2020, those capital improvement projects. Those are things that we left on the list. Those are projects in excess of $500,000 that we've put on the county list. They have not been funded, but they don't go away. Some of them go away when we build a brand new school, replace the school, but if we don't replace the school, then some of those projects just continue to add every year. So we keep those out there, even though we know that it's going to be very difficult to fund that total amount. Okay. And then even far down the road, 2027, which is basically an 8-year timeline, would be the replacement. Replacement for the high school. So go beyond 8 years, obviously repurposing existing schools, but this is the portion of the budget that is very gray, because once we get past that 8-year timeline, things can change significantly between now and then, so it may change all those priorities. But we know based on growth, we will have to probably add another middle school, a couple elementary schools, obviously replacing Central Cabarrus High School, and then we've had on the list for quite some time was adding auditorium and performing arts facilities at the 2 middle schools that currently do not have those, which is Harris Road and C.C. Griffin. So, with that, we'll get a little bit further detail. West Cabarrus High School, again, 2020, 1,800 students. The good news is it's going to relieve J.M. Robinson, Central Cabarrus High School, Hickory Ridge High School, Cox Mill, and Northwest High School. That's what we intended for it to do. It was to be put in the middle of the county, provide relief to all 5 of our major high schools in that area. It's going to do so. It will add 1,800 seats to our system. Hickory Ridge Elementary is coming online in 2020, 940 students. It will provide relief for Harrisburg Elementary and obviously Patriots Elementary, which is probably our worst shape right now as far as population overload currently. We are seeing a lot of need at Pitt School Road Elementary as well. And so it will provide relief to those 4 elementary schools is what we intend to do. The new middle school will come online in 2022. We're appreciative of the county to let us continue to move forward with that. It will be 1,200 students. It will be a feeder for J.M. Robinson, which allow us to align our districts to make sure that they have a feeder school. Every middle school will have a direct feeder, and it will relieve Hickory Ridge Middle School, obviously, Harris Road, and then Winkler. I forgot Butch's name there for a minute, sorry. But Winkler Middle School. No Butch in a long time. But then our next project beyond that, which is not currently funded, a portion, we have talked to the county about keeping that on track for 2024. That would be the downtown replacement, our Brown McAllister. It will open in 2024 with 800 students. It will be constructed on site. It will provide relief for W.M. Irving Elementary and Wolf Meadows Elementary School. That will allow us to bring the neighborhoods that were districted out of that some 15, some 20 years ago back into that school as that school expands. Then Coulter and Webb. The reason we have 24 or 26 is because if we can build it off-site and purchase a district property, and it was a larger site, we could build it concurrently with our Brown McAllister without it having to be a swing school situation. If we do not have off-site land and have to rebuild it on the existing site, then we obviously must finish our Brown McAllister first, move Coulter and Webb into it as a swing school situation, and 2 years later be able to open up Coulter and Webb. So that's why 24, 26, or it could be, later depending on the funding with the county. But that, again, will open with either 650 on-site or 800 off-site, and it would relieve Weddington Hills Elementary School, which is seeing quite a bit of growth in that area as well. Next high school online is Northwest Cabarrus High School replacement. Opens 25, 26, depending on what we can negotiate with the county as far as the funding come down. It's 1,800 students. It will add 500 seats. The reason pushing that to 2026 gives us some pause is because based on projections with our demographics consultant, they estimate that be a high of low 1,800 to a high of 2,300 students at at Cox Mill High School. I picked 21 in the middle, assuming to build out over the next 5 years, which is probably maybe a little conservative. And then also at Northwest, they picked anywhere from 1,380 up to 1,650. So I picked the middle about 1,500. So we're looking at 3,600 students in those 2 districts by 2024. And right now, our total capacity at those 2 schools is 2,950. So we're already going to be 650 students over capacity by 2024. So even if we open in 2024, we'd already have 150 students over capacity in those 2 districts. So pushing it to 2026 will only probably make that situation just a little worse. Central Cabarrus High School obviously opened in 2027. It's the same age as Northwest Cabarrus High School. It's in a very tough portion of its district now. At one time, it was in the middle of the district, and everybody from the southern part of the county went there. But as we continue to expand north, that district's continued to move farther and farther south, where now Central Cabarrus High School is on the very northern portion of our district. But it would need to be rebuilt for 1,800 students, add 500 more seats to its current capacity, and it would relieve, obviously, Hickory Ridge High School and maybe Mount Pleasant at that time. It may even have to, by 2027, it may actually have to relieve West Cabarrus again, depending on what the growth characteristics are in that area. But we look at moving that one quite a bit farther south in the county to be more in the center of the district. In our capital improvement projects, as we said, those are projects that the county can fund with us, a new roof or a new chiller or whatever it might be, or new electrical systems. Those come on each, and we ask for those, and they get us a couple every year, and we're very fortunate to be able to get a couple every year, usually a couple roofs and maybe a chiller replacement or even electrical system replacement. Those are pretty big ticket items, but we continue to press on those. And then renovations to Beverly Hills Elementary, that is something we have to look at. You know, we're going to have demolition, reconstruction, or we're going to change the use of that facility. It'll be a training center, admin offices, whatever it might be. That's something this board's going to have to choose what they wish to do there. If you wish to go back and build another school on that site, then that's probably obviously down the road a ways as well, waiting for that to fall in the funding line behind Coulter and Webb or Central Cabarrus. So you make it 2028, 2029. And then renovations to R. Brown McAllister, which if we're able to build simultaneously Coulter and Webb and R. Brown McAllister together, by 2026 we could begin renovations, or 2024 we could begin renovations to be open in 2026 to allow the Mary Frances Wall Center to be able to move into that facility at R. Brown McAllister, which bodes very well for the type of construction it is. It's a balloon type construction, more easily renovated than most of our other schools because some of the others are basically structural masonry, which means we can't move a whole lot of walls. We can't take a whole lot of things down. This one basically is built a beam and T-beam situation, allows us to be a little more flexibility on what we do on renovations. So it is a candidate for renovation.
Thanks, Tim. So one of the goals that we wanted to accomplish in this presentation was really to give you the level of detail that you need to kind of look down the road and understand what, you know, when I push this domino over, what happens to the next ones in line. And part of, so hopefully you've seen that with kind of the broad overview, and then Tim giving a little bit more detail. And then we have the subsequent slides have even further detail in terms of capacity and relief, and then the actual details on what actions take place in construction and that timeline. This is a prototype of basically the spreadsheet of funding. So you can see the example up here. I just randomly put Cabarrus Middle School open 2023, not relevant to the plan. It's the spreadsheet that's relevant to the plan. And then Cabarrus Elementary School opens 2024. But essentially it would be the projects that would go along the top. The timeline, you see fiscal year 1920, and then it could be even broken in by quarter. That's quarters 1 and 2 for fiscal year 2021, quarters 3 and 4, and then go down the line. So what you get is all of our projects from the capital plan along the top, and then you'd see the funding for each quarter and each year down the left-hand side. And when we talk about collaboration with county commissioners, depth of understanding of both boards and what money is needed when, that is extremely important, understanding the cash flow and when we have it and when we can, make decisions and fund certain aspects of each plan. So what you'll see in the following slides is really a breakdown of each of the projects, and then, what the timing is on not every component, but the major components of each of the projects. So Tim's going to jump in on each of those projects just to give an overview, and then what you'll see down at the bottom again are the cost, the schools that it relieves, and the capacity that we'll have at each site.
As we talked about earlier, the new middle school obviously scheduled for completion in 2022. As you can see, it does take quite a bit of timeline to make that happen. We're already in 2019, hiring the architect now, be hiring the construction manager at risk also this year. As we begin to move into the contract itself, construction will begin in 2020, April of 2020, which gives us a little over 2 years to complete the project. It'd still be a fairly tight schedule for 180,000 square foot building, but it gives us 2 years. We have before been compressed because of some of the funding cycles for the county, and sometimes we only had 16 months to build a school of that size, and we just really don't wish to put ourselves in that much of a stress level. So we'd like to have those things at those 2 year increments. R. Brown McAllister, if it opens up in 2024, obviously we need to look at making sure our land was in place for it, making sure that our construction contract, our architectural contract starts in 2021, again with construction manager at risk following a couple months later, and then began construction in April of 2022, again allowing us that 2 year cycle for This school will probably be 120, 125,000. The reason it would probably take a little bit longer on this site is because we're working on an existing school site, so access won't be quite as easy as just being able to go in and totally take control of a site, because there will be school going on during that construction period. So we've allowed ourselves 2 years for elementary, which sometimes we only have about 18. So we feel like that's probably a pretty good timeline for that. Again, it will projected to open 800 students. Right now, current enrollment projections for this year are 371, so you can see it could add probably about 400 seats by the time we have it under construction, which is what we look to do to have the extra neighborhoods to be able to come into this school. It will, again, relieving Wolf Meadows and W.M. Irving Elementary School. But the cost of that is about $34 million at this time. With that, talk to Cultural Web.
So with Colton Webb, as we noted a couple times, there's really two options there, and that options really rely on whether or not we can purchase a piece of property in close proximity so we would not have to actually have a swing space for Colton Webb replacement. So option A would be a scheduled completion in June 2024, so that could be built if we were able to purchase the land sometime soon, by 2020, and then get the architect contract underway in 2021. Students could stay on the current site while the new Colton Webb was built in another location, and that would also allow us to have a replacement capacity of 800 students as opposed to 650, which you'll see in option B. So option A allows a larger capacity. It also allows a scheduled completion of 2024, so it really speeds up the opportunity to create about 800 open seats between that and R. Brown McAllister in 2024. You can see the current projected enrollments at 494, replacement capacity is 800, and that would relieve Weddington Hills and a small portion of Irvin. So we shared this, well, here's option B. Would be that completion in June 26th. And that option B, again, is swinging this. We completed R. Brown in 2024, swing those students over to the old R. Brown facility, and then rebuild on site. Now, we do have purchased land on there. And you're like, Brian, why do you have to purchase land if we're rebuilding on site? So because of the construction efforts, we may have to potentially purchase some smaller parcels of land to actually complete the construction there. And it wouldn't be a $2 million cost in terms of, what we'd pay for well, I don't know, it might be great. It probably would be less than that, but it wouldn't be the typical cost of land that you would buy for a brand new elementary school. And you can see on the option B is also the smaller capacity of 650 students. All right, and then we showed this in our small group meetings. We wanted, obviously, the benefit of an open forum for that, to take a look at this. So these would be, potentially be districts and the seats that the movement of potential students for Colton Webb Elementary and R. Brown McAllister. So if you look in the yellow, and I'm sorry, I may have to go up to the front, but I'll try without it. So the Colton Webb you'll see is outlined in yellow on the map. So let's see if I can. So this area here. So that would be the land that would be gained, that would be going, which once attended Colton Webb, that is now Weddington Hills District, that would be going back to Colton Webb Elementary School some 20 years later. And then you could see the numbers that would be gained. So if we went to just the railroad tracks, which is right here, we gain it would move 110 students from Weddington Hills to Colton. If you went out to the creek, be an additional 162 students, and if you went to Highway 601, which is right here, it'd be an additional 264 student relief from Weddington Hills that would be added to the population at Colton Webb Elementary School. And then if you look at R. Brown McAllister, you'll see that it's outlined in red. Again, there's a small portion of Irvin Elementary students here, and then Wolf Meadow students as well. And again, you can see the numbers. So Highway 601 be 378, To the creek, it would be 210, and to the railroad, it would be 244, and you'll see the schools that would be impacted by that. So that's very draft, very preliminary, but that is a potential impact on numbers that you could see by, and we'd recapture some seats at some overcrowded schools. And we'll move on to the Northwest Cabarrus High School replacement with a scheduled completion of 2026. And again, as Tim said, I highlighted this in yellow because the need for seats are going to be there. The need for seats that we're projecting out are going to be there in 2024. But knowing funding streams and knowing there's a huge priority on replacing some aging facilities in the downtown area and creating elementary seats as well, it was really, quite honestly, it was really difficult to choose, that order. And that we need your feedback on that. And we're going to need county commissioners' feedback on that as well about that completion date. But I want to definitely highlight that as a discussion point, following the presentation.
And like I say, moving that to June 2026, that's why it's highlighted in yellow. The 2024 date was originally on the 10-year plan and has been for several years. But what we're looking at doing, to purchase land, we're going to purchase land this year. So that's going to happen whether we do it in 2024 or 2026. The land's going to be purchased. If we have to go to 2026 and it has to slip 2 years, then obviously the contract for the architects and the construction manager at risk could drop to 2021, 2023, and 2023. And obviously the construction will start in 2024, which is, those just slip with the same 2 years if we had to move those back. Again, it will add 500 seats, 1,800 student capacity, adding 500 seats to that district. We just told you a moment ago, even with the conservative side of the growth projections from our consultants, we're looking at probably 650 students being added to that district. So we're going to actually be over capacity the day it would open by about 150 students. So that's a concern we have, and that's why we want to make sure we always have that discussion, because we have to understand building a school that much farther down the road, knowing that capacity will be reached well before you even actually complete the construction, is kind of tough, because I hate to build a school and throw them over the next day, but or redistrict one or the other if we could find capacity somewhere else to redistrict them to. But the funding cost at that point in time would be $83.5 million. It does provide us an option for renovating the Northwest Cabarrus High School to go ahead and take down the portion of that was built in 1965 and leave the newer portions there and come back and renovate and add classrooms to make that the new middle school and add capacity there, which right now the capacity is about 950. We go to about 1,200 by doing that. So I guess with that. Oh, I'm sorry, that's my push. Renovation of existing facilities. We have several facilities right now that we need to vacate, that we need to redo. Obviously, the Glenn Center is something we probably should have vacated many moons ago, but it was built in the 1920s. We do have about 100 to 120 kids there at any given time. It is something we need to relocate. We also have offices at the Glenn Center, so we have a twofold need there. We have the old building we use for classrooms, the newer building built back in the 80s. It houses basically administration. Both of those need to be relocated off that site, and we need to find someone else who wants to love that place besides us with their time and money. But hopefully we'll do that.
Yeah, so we currently have EC offices there, technology, Dane's housed over there, Kids Plus, accountability, Power School. So there are multiple district offices housed over there. I know a lot of people, when we say Glenn Center, just think of the student population that we have over there, but there's multiple staff over there that are serving schools on a daily basis.
Absolutely. And then we talked about R. Brown McAllister Elementary School. I say it is probably the best candidate we have of our aging schools to be repurposed simply because of the type of construction. It does allow us to pretty much go ahead and take all the walls completely out, leave the roof structure and and come back in and reconfigure it to our better use. It is all on one level. It is all in a pod situation. Mary Frances Wall has 3 basic populations. They have severe and profound, they have pre-K, and then they obviously have EC. Those are 3 distinct populations, and those have basically 3 major pods, and all 3 of those could then be reconfigured to house those populations in a pretty safe environment, especially with an enclosed courtyard that it creates currently. Mary Frances Wall Center, I know that's Ms. Carpenter's favorite project over there. That portion of that school was built in 1927. That portion of it is vacated at this time. The only reason that building is still standing is because it houses our boiler for the rest of the campus. So therefore, we tear that down, our boiler goes away. So we have to either spend a lot of money and buy a new boiler and do a new piping system to keep the system open where it is now, or else relocate it off of that site. But I would say, if we do remove Mary Frances Wall to R. Brown McAllister, then we could take the newest portion of Mary Frances Wall and maybe convert it to the offices that would house the current offices of administration at the Glenn Center. Could move there, because that would be a professional office rather than a school, and it wouldn't be as dangerous as far as the highway and its location, and the old portion could get demolished and turned into a parking lot, which it probably should be. And then Beverly Hills Elementary, depending on what you do on the disposition of that, obviously, there are several different options for that. We've talked about it in several different ways, being a training center, being for administration offices itself, or a teaching and learning center, or if you decide at some point in time to make it another school, whatever capacity you do there. Those are options you need to put together for us to be able to include that into the renovation plan.
All right, so I know you have lots of topics and questions and things to ask and discuss. I thought I'd throw a few up there just for conversation starters, but these are some things that we need feedback on. Timeline, project order, feedback and thoughts on that. Repurposing of facilities, obviously we need some feedback on that as well. Additional facilities, are we missing something? I mean, we have lots of urgent needs in terms of capacity. Is there something that we left out that we need to consider in this plan? And then, just considering the life cycle of existing facilities. I mean, the whole renovation repair that came up in the feedback from a board member about renovation repair versus replacements. There's deferred maintenance cost and recurring expenses that happen from from maintaining an older building, and the inefficiencies that we incur from that as well. So those are just some starter topics. We'll be glad to entertain any questions, and if we don't have an answer, we'll get it for you.
One of the things under the additional facilities, that you might want to consider is obviously the Opportunity School now is at the Glenn Center, that we may end up looking at maybe a standalone facility to allow that to be moved off campus, maybe something like we did at the PLC, but that's the project that's not been listed on our 10-year plan to date. So that would be a project that would be added to our 10-year plan should we decide that would be the best use for that, to move that off-site. So that's just an example of additional facilities that we're talking about.
Board members, do we want to do a more of a round robin instead of kind of hopping all over the place? For each board member to ask a question, make a comment, or whatever?
I mean,
I just don't want us to go on 2 hours and kind of mishmash, so if we can kind of focus what each of us is interested in. So,
I mean, I have a question that I wanted, and maybe you explained this, maybe you didn't. I mean, it's 9 o'clock, so my brain is definitely not working like.
It's a lot of information.
Yeah, so the Northwest Cabarrus replacement. So we'll go to that slide if you can. So you mentioned that it would already be over capacity by 150. Is that right?
Yeah, so we've got the projected numbers as of right now. So Cox Mill High School has a current project capacity of 1668. So depending on programming, it's somewhere in the 1600 range. So based on a 23-24 projection that we have, a minimum that we would be there, it would be at 1844. That's in the year 23-24. Be at 1,844 students. If we're figuring that on the potential maximum based on growth, 2,300. So somewhere in a range of 1,844 to 2,300 students, and that's those are projections.
So
Again,
can I have you clarify that, because it does get a little bit confusing. So right now, there's about how many students at Cox Mill?
we are projected at
This year, Ms. Reimer may know with projections.
it's a right around 1,600.
So this year, right now, we've got how many, Ms. Reimer?
At Cox Mill High?
Yeah.
Over 1,900.
Yeah,
so
we've got,
that's before the redistricting.
So we've got 1,900 or so kids currently. Then when West Cabarrus opens up, about how many Cox Mill students go? I mean, again, we're ballparking
300
here.
to 400.
Right, so we're going to go from around 1,900 to about 1,500, right? So, and that's about what the capacity is, a little bit more, a little bit less. So from the time West Cabarrus opens up in 2020,
Yep.
then to 2024, we grow from 1,500 to best case scenario 1,800-ish and worst case what was the number?
2,300.
23. So we're going to grow that many students in that amount of time, 500 or 600 kids at Cox Mill. And I think because of Cox Mill opening with West Cabarrus, it does get confusing, that number, but that's what we're talking about, growing 600 kids or so in that 5-year period, right?
That's
okay.
correct.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but I think that was part of what was hard to follow in that, because there's like 3 things that are going on with that. And then Northwest is in the same boat. They get relieved by West Cabarrus, but essentially in that same 5-year period, grow about how many students?
Sure, and they have a current capacity of around 1,300, so they could grow over that period of time from an 1103 projection when West Cabarrus opens to growing from anywhere between 200 to 700 students over that time. So they could grow to capacity of 1,350 to the 1,800s.
Right, so just want to make sure that what they're saying is, so when West Cabarrus opens up, and we're kind of okay at Northwest and Cox Mill for that year, 5 years later, we've grown 1,000 students kind of beyond what the capacity was. Or it could be less or more, but it's definitely like, where are they going to go? So that is a little confusing because we have West Cabarrus in the middle. That's the reason I jumped in, so sorry.
And West Cabarrus could potentially grow during that time to capacity or slightly over it. So the projections are all, all 3 of those schools will be full up by 2024, if not over.
So this may sound like a real simple solution, but I mean, we haven't built Northwest Cabarrus replacement yet. Why can't we just make it bigger than 1,800 students?
So we get asked that question all the time, and my answer back is that when you get bigger than about 1,800 students, I mean, you can go to 1,900, you could go to 2,000, but 1,800 students is a very large school that it's probably impersonal enough at 1,800, but when you get bigger than that, when you go to Florida and Texas where you have 3,000, 4,000 kids, the example I always give is there's one president of the student body for those 4,000 kids, whereas at Mount Pleasant High School there's 800 kids. So for the same amount of kids, you'll have 5 presidents of the student body, right? There's still only 15 kids on the basketball team, so out of 4,000 kids, only 15 get to play basketball versus 5 schools so it just takes away tons of opportunities and becomes impossible. At 1,800, it's probably impossible for it to be very personal and, the principal, assistant principals to know all the students. But at 4,000, 3,000, it's impossible for the principal to even know all the teachers. And so philosophically, I just get to where I say I'm never going to recommend that we go much bigger than that, because I wouldn't want my own child to go to a school that was any bigger than that. It can be done. It's done all over the country. But I think it gets to the place where you just say, I wouldn't want my child to go there, and so I can't recommend that we do it. But if the board said, well, we want to go to 2,500, we can. I just don't think it's a good idea for students. And what I think is attractive to Cabarrus County, if people want to move, is to at least feel like they're part of that. When you get to 4,000 and 5,000 students, I just don't think as many people are going to want to be a part of it. I wouldn't want my own child to. So.
And I totally agree with you. Which I think is probably the biggest argument for the smaller schools, especially the ones downtown, because you do get to have that personal relationship with those kids, the principals, the teachers, they know each other. So yes, to your point, bigger is not always better. But so that does answer my question for that. I appreciate it.
Ms. Carpenter?
Thank you. And in that kind of vein, and what we're going to see and what we saw in this study we just recently had done, you know, we are seeing that upward trend and that growth keep coming, but 10 years from now, we're going to start seeing that start, maybe not even 10, we're going to start seeing that start to level off and maybe start going the other way. Well, we don't want to have all these big schools and nobody to put in them. What we've seen counties around us already starting to see that and starting to close their schools. So we don't want to see all these big schools with nobody to put in them. So I think us staying on that level is the best way. Well, you know me, I like to just jump in there. We've got a lot of unanswered questions and things I think we need to answer. So I'm going to go ahead and put something on the table and see what happens. So at this point, what I'm going to do is ask and see what happens. I'm going to put a reversal to vacate Beverly Hills and put it on the 10-year plan at this point, and put it in right there with R. Brown McAllister and see what happens. If I can get
I'll
a second
second.
on that.
I seconded.
So, Mrs. Carpenter, can you restate that in one motion?
Yeah, I would like to reverse the vacate for Beverly Hills and to place it on the 10-year plan in the 1 to 8 years, put it right at with R. Brown McAllister, right in that same time frame in the 2024, but in the same area right there. They're right there together on the 10-year plan. And that way we've got, and with that we could do some other adjustment afterwards, because then that would change a lot of things on the 10-year plan. But that way, just put it together.
Okay, from a discussion standpoint, I want to ask for some clarifications. So we talked earlier about doing capital plan before finding the operating money. So there has not been a viable option presented to fund years to forever, number 2 to forever on the teacher supplement. So where would that come from?
Well, everybody, I'm waiting for other people. Nobody else has put anything forward. I mean, I've been looking for stuff. I hadn't heard anybody else say anything. I've been looking. I haven't heard anybody else pipe up with anything. And I'm not putting the children, you know, I haven't heard anybody else come up with anything.
Well, I think it kind of goes along, at least when I'm thinking the if-then-else type statement. If you support vacating Beverly Hills, then you have the money. If you don't support it, then it's upon you to come up with the money. So.
Well, I've just put a motion on the floor.
Okay.
This is something completely different. I've got
Well, no,
my
it's all
motion.
relational as far as cash flow. So other board members, questions, comments for discussion on this item?
So these timeframes, and I know Brian and Tim, we talked about this when I met with y'all during those meetings that we had. So how did we come up with these numbers as far as these opening dates? Because that's definitely different from what we were given back in January. So where did those come from? The R. Brown McAllister.
Brown McAllister was 2024.
Okay. So the Coltrane Webb.
Culture Web was 2026 originally, because it was going to have to be built on site and have to move kids off campus for the swing school. That was something we presented 4 years ago, I guess it was, my first time. So that's still the plan. We had an option to be able to purchase maybe some property off-site, which will allow us then not to have to use it as swing school. If we don't, that gives us flexibility to ask for the money for our 2024 opening or keep it at 2026.
But how do we plan for a school to open if we don't have the property?
Well, if the R. Brown McAllister, we have.
No,
the
I'm talking
property.
about for Coltrane Webb.
For Coltrane Webb, again, the plan is if we don't have property, we move them off campus, use the property we have, and do it for 650 kids 2 years later.
And we're gonna move them where?
To hold R. Brown McAllister during that holding period.
So our Brown McAllister replacement has to open
Yes, ma'am.
in order for this to happen.
Yes, ma'am.
So do we have a commitment from the county commission to do that? I mean, that literally has to happen now. I mean, not in a year or two, that has to happen now. We have to make that happen now in order for us just to meet that guideline.
If not,
So
everything gets
this
pushed.
is what I've been talking about. You know, we can put these numbers and these projections on here all day long, but if we don't have a commitment for that to be done, there's no way to make any of that scenario take place.
And I'll just say, Ms. Grimsley, from talking with Mr. Downs and Mr. Morris from the county, that's part of what they want to discuss. They want to show their cash flow and when they can fit things in. So, for example, in that concept diagram or that spreadsheet that Brian had pulled up, can you pull that up again? I'm not sure where. Oh, it's right after that one, yeah. So go back.
Oh, you're talking about the...
That one, yeah. So Ms. Klutz and the county finance department have done something similar to this over time, but we never saw it. It was their working document. So the idea behind this is that we would be able to show, take the timeline, the calendar view, the list view, put it in here as far as what money is needed when, and then see over on the right side, it would total over on the right all the projects that we need funding for in 1920, 2021, and so on. And the half years were put in there because you'll remember sometimes they say, well, if we can wait until January and pay it, you know, it's helpful to them. So if excuse me, if we list whatever order of projects on here, the county then sees about what we need in each year according to the different elements of the project. So using example, if we need to buy some adjacent land at R. Brown McAllister, we would put that land in here in the very first year. So for example, 2021. That might be enough that the county wants to bite off and say, yeah, that's step one. Let's go ahead and get that because we can handle it in this fiscal year or a certain fiscal year. But then they want, you know, I'll say all the elements, the architects, the list you had up there before, the architects, the grading, construction manager at risk, all those things, and break it down over years. So that was helpful to see when we were just mocking one up to see how that spreadsheet would work. It was helpful to see with just made up numbers how much it totals when you start tiering these projects down. Because you're not finished with one. You're not doing them one after another. You're doing them overlapped. So anyway, so that's what they want to talk about.
So again, and I get that, but that's why I'm saying we're putting the cart before the horse. Even if we take this exactly like it is, and we have our meeting, without the commitment from them to be able to do this funding in this order, that's a really hard decision to have to make, knowing that if they come back and say that they can't purchase land for R. Brown McAllister in 2020 and they can't do it till 2021 or 2022, then now you've got R. Brown McAllister not opening till 2026, 2027 possibly.
Yeah, I mean, that's possible, but they, I felt very comfortable. They were saying it was going to be, well, it was going to be on closer to the front end of what we're expecting with 2024.
But I would feel more comfortable having that meeting first and getting commitment before we make any decisions about anything.
And holding off on.
Yeah, because how do we do that? I mean, that is going to be a huge backlash if we close Beverly Hills now, we lose those 400 seats. I mean, I'm just back to where I feel like I'm just beating a dead horse with this information. But at the end of the day, then we've got R. Brown McAllister sitting there, Coltrane Webb sitting there, Beverly Hills. I mean, that is, to me, is just not good planning, not absolutely. No, I mean, Dr. Lowder, you spoke to a guessing game about teachers and the budget and buying one year versus the next year and paying it back. Until we know exactly what's going to take place here, I don't understand how we make this decision on anything right now
The
before
county
we
is,
know.
yeah, the county is asking us, as they always do.
I get that part.
For our priorities.
I get it.
So what are our priorities?
Right. And I get that. I get that part. I do, Cindy. And I get that if we're gonna leave it here, that's fine. If we're gonna rearrange them some, like Ms. Carpenter spoke to, whatever we do in this order, it is my true feeling that until we meet with them and get some type of commitment on where that next funding cycle is gonna fall out, I don't know how we make these decisions maybe after that meeting, but not now. I mean, I don't feel comfortable with doing that.
Well, there's two things at hand. The motion Ms. Carpenter put on the table, which directly affects paying the supplement, and where does that come from? And then the second is the priorities. So in your motion, you included to put the rebuild on the 10-year plan, but if there's already concern that the county can't fund what is already listed on slide 7, then how can we insert something else in there?
Is it that they can't fund it? I mean, again, like I haven't had a joint meeting with them to find out, how they're going to fund any of these projects. So is it they can't fund it, or are they not going to fund it?
I don't know how you really answer. We can't answer for them.
Well, I tell
They
you,
can fund in pieces. That's why we want to have all those things broken out.
yeah, and their current projection of revenue that they see over the next 4 to 5 years, they can tell you how much revenue they project to take in. Then they know how much debt service they have going out. And of course, Kelly can talk to you about all the other expenses they have going out. They can project in how much money do I have free available to either take on additional debt or pay in cash. And so right now, they'll have about a 3-year window that they can probably project on what they're going to see. And they may come and say, well, 3 years from now, I'm going to be in the hole. I don't have any cash for you, so therefore I can't borrow any more money.
And before we meet, they expect to have a debt analysis, I guess you'd call it, completed. They're in the process of doing that now.
What about that bond that we were talking about?
Yeah, the state still hasn't decided on those things.
I mean, there's so many scenarios that are like, what if this, then this, then this.
Yeah.
I mean, none of us really know for sure how any of this is going to turn out. So regardless as to the decision that we make with any of this stuff, it's subject to change at any given time.
Yeah, and what we do know is where we expect to need the seats. Those projections are usually pretty solid.
And us not doing anything, everything gets kicked down, keeps getting kicked down the road, and us saying, oh no, let's not do anything, or let's not do that, and us not doing anything, and we've been pushing this out. That's why I'm putting this on the table now. Let's get it on there. Us not putting anything on there and not doing anything is not going to get anything done.
Yeah, can you clarify what you mean by not putting anything on there?
Well, I tried to get something on this earlier, and it kept getting pushed off, and I'm trying to get something on this one way or the other, and that's why I'm trying to get this done now, to get something on the 10-year plan and trying to get something trying to get this done. So these people, we lost a lot of good teachers because they didn't, at Beverly Hills, because they didn't know what was happening, because, because they didn't know what was going on, and so they went ahead and left, and because nothing had been decided, and so they went ahead and left, and so because nothing had been decided, and so, because it got kicked down the road, and so something needs to be decided once and for all. So that's why I'm saying, let's get something done.
Point of clarification on the motion.
The motion is to reverse the vacate and to put Beverly Hills on the 10-year plan in the same time where you've got McAllister, where you've got the 2024 year where you've got McAllister.
You're saying before McAllister?
Well, at the same time.
clarification I'm asking for, please, is what's the price tag of that?
We had that study done, they had for the 500, what was your estimate?
So does the motion, in effect, add $24 million for our Beverly Hills?
What did you have on that?
I'm just
So
asking for the
to add
clarification.
$18,600,000 for the building. You put back in your soft costs, your architects, you're looking at $22 to $24 million in today's dollars. 2024, you're probably looking at 26.
So does the motion, in effect, change the funding needs there on the bottom line to $404.5 million, give or take?
It would probably be 400 million plus.
And keep in mind, this is only a request. This doesn't make it happen.
Well, that happens all the time.
Yeah, like I said, I worry about the seats. We don't need seats where Beverly Hills is when there's a school fairly close that has the seats. I'm concerned with R. Brown and Coulter and Webb, we can expand the STEM program at Coulter and Webb, even with the 650 seats. And R. Brown brings a significant number of seats in growth to accommodate multiple schools.
So let me ask a question. Tim, so what's the backup plan if we cannot get property for Coulter and Webb?
I built it on the site, existing site.
The same school?
I built 650 students. There's two options. Option one, I acquire off-site property. I can build it, expand it for 800. Option two, if I cannot acquire off-site property and I have to build it back on the existing site, I have to do demolition, build it back on the 11.5 acres we have there, and I have to move the kids off campus for 2 years, just like we did at Royal Oaks, so I can build it back on that site at smaller because I can't make 800 fit on that 11.5 acres.
But it would go to the new R, or it would go to the new R. Brown, not to Royal Oaks.
No, I just said, just like I did at Royal Oaks, I moved the kids
Oh,
off
just like
campus
you
for
did.
2 years while I built
So
Royal
you're
Oaks.
building a smaller Coulter and Webb?
I had to build a smaller one because I wouldn't
But I
have the
thought
land
y'all
mass
But
to
not
do it.
bigger than what it is today.
Bigger than what it is
Just some
today, but
clarification.
smaller than the
Yeah.
800.
Yeah.
And what was the capacity on that? Okay, 650?
Right now, we have about 500 students there, 497 students, I think, at that school. And we would go to 650, which only add about 150 seats. If we could build it off campus, we could add, obviously another 200 or 150 more, so we had 300 total new seats to allow for that.
So in actuality, if we went with option B, building it on site, we would, as far as absorbing some of the Weddington Hills, we would only be able to absorb maybe 150 less.
Unless you did something with the
So we
program
really
in
couldn't
there.
do the larger cut.
No.
You'd have to do it
You
smaller.
have much less relief for
I
Wedding
think there
Hills,
would
which is.
be a little bit of a dynamic there, though, from the standpoint of R. Brown is STEM also, and would have additional seats. So as far as program choice, I think there's probably some flexibility there where parents may choose, if there was more room, that they would go to the new R. Brown.
STEM is at Beverly Hills also.
I know, I'm just referring to the numbers at R. Brown and Coulter and Webb in that statement.
Question, what if you did not replace Coulter and Webb? And you had Beverly Hills and R. Brown McAllister? And you just wouldn't be able to expand it,
But aren't we at a maintenance cycle issue too with Coulter and Webb?
Coulter Webb actually is our oldest campus being used right now. Some of it was built back in the.
It's just in a little better shape than Beverly Hills? Or?
Well, we had a newer wing put on, and it's just it's almost in better shape. It's just that.
kids into Beverly Hills and R. Brown McAllister.
You're saying to close Coultron?
I'm just saying the option here, if you rebuild Beverly Hills and you have an R. Brown McAllister for 800 seats, you could split Coulter and you wouldn't have to replace that school.
I think, but that's,
Then you couldn't, I guess, expand for Weddington.
Yeah, you get no relief from Weddington in that scenario.
800 seats where R. Brown McAllister is now doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, you're basically taking seats from Irving, and Irving doesn't need to lose 130 seats. You're taking seats from Wolf Meadow, and you're taking kids out of it. You're going to our STEM program. So then how do you feel Wolf Meadow? Then you hesitate kids that are going to traditional school and putting them in your ed school. Or you're going too far and then you're not lining up on the other end with the middle school or high school.
But Rob, in that scenario, you got to remember, once you take the kids from Wolf Meadow, then you open up Wolf Meadow and you can begin to move some students out of Pitt School, which is pretty highly crowded. The same thing goes with Weddington Hills.
I don't feel comfortable taking kids out of traditional school and enforcing when they're year-round school for that. I don't think parents go like that either.
When I'm guessing those things will
Yeah,
all be
you're guessing,
reviewed
and you're guessing
when-
where we'll be at that time. Right. But the bigger thing is movement of children, where we need to move them. And the thing is you need to build the capacity so you can move some students out of Weddington Hills, because you got to move some students out of Carley Fur. And so, you know, there is a waterfall that goes on here, and you've got to look at it that way. Well, I think most of the students are not going directly from Irvin as much as they're going from Wolf Meadow. And the fact that you're getting the central part of Concord back to where it should be.
Yeah, we need to do a shift to empty some seats on the more west side of the county. And we would gain those by shifting the school lines to the east.
So can I make a recommendation? It's really hard to sit here and remember those numbers that you've stated with all those surrounding areas. Can we get a map again with the numbers, the capacity numbers, where we're at, the existing, except all of them, including all of them? That would be very, very helpful, especially for me coming back on the board. And now that we've redistricted one time, really seeing what that looks like compared to what it was before.
Yes.
Can we do that? That would be real helpful.
Clarification, you mean
Yeah,
all of
that's-
them, what schools?
Is
you
that
talk-
still online? Because I know I looked it up one time.
Well, it might be, but we don't have it tonight, so, I mean,
Yeah, let's look at slide 15.
Is that slide?
and maybe those projections as well.
Yep.
That would be helpful. And I'm still, my thought is still, things might look a little different between all those schools if we could see all those numbers at the same time. That's what makes this so hard. It's a guessing game with everything we're doing. But at the end of the day, we're banking that we can get land for Coulter and Webb or not, then we got to go to Plan B. It changes everything compared to what the commissioners are going to be willing to fund when. I'm not saying they're not going to fund it, Laura, as we were talking about, but it's their time frame is the problem. So that's just my thought. If we could have that so that we could look at it, that would be great.
Yeah, we have a motion on the floor. I keep hearing that we need more information.
I prefer not to vote today. I prefer to vote next Monday.
Vote on Carolyn's motion.
Yes. I would like to see, again, responding to her motion, let's see a proposal that has Beverly Hills on it, and what effect that would have. Because obviously that's quite a bit more added to the plan.
Ms. Carpenter, would you entertain taking your motion off the floor until next Monday night so that we can get this new information and take a look at it?
Yeah, that would be, what information do we want to have?
We have two alternatives for Coulter and Webb. Let's see an alternative with Beverly Hills in it.
What did he say? I couldn't hear him.
We have two alternatives for Coulter and Webb. I'd like to see an alternative with Beverly Hills in it.
Okay, well, I will put it, can we vote on it then? I don't want somebody to come back and say, well, you can't vote on it.
Well, no, it can be on the agenda, but I think we need to, if you want additional information, you need to study the information and then come back with, pros and cons or whatever discussion. So.
Yeah, no, get the information now. Before we get here next Monday.
Yeah.
So that we can look at it between now and then, yes.
As long as we can vote on it next Monday, I don't want somebody to come up and say, well, you can't vote on it.
Yeah, I want to be able to vote on it Monday.
Yeah, you can vote on it. All I'm saying is if there's questions, I hope everybody will study the information that's sent.
Okay,
So.
well, Can we just table it to Monday then? Is that more
can do that.
appropriate? Would that be more appropriate? I would like to see us table it to Monday if that's more appropriate. So I will table it to Monday. Do I have a second for that?
You do, yes.
Okay.
Second that.
So table the motion to 8:12.
Do we need to take a vote on that then? That way I'm tabling it.
Or, Mr. Shaw, do we need to vote on tabling, or do we just, it's basically off the table tonight?
It'll be on the agenda next week.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Mr. Shaw to answer here.
Table it, it's officially on the agenda.
Okay. But do we need to vote to table tonight?
Vote to table.
Okay, so we,
Make a motion to put it on the agenda next week?
no, it will automatically go on the agenda with the table motion. So we have a motion and a second on tabling Mrs. Carpenter's prior motion.
Can I add a relevant piece of information? So our person that develops the maps and the numbers of the map that you saw that was produced up there is actually out this week. And so we may have some difficulty getting the maps. We could develop some scenarios, but the numbers would be a little soft maybe.
And I think if we would just clarify exactly what the board's asking for in those maps, when you say all those maps, we may be able to pull something together that's already here, but she is completely like way out in the woods. I can't even get her on the phone, so.
How many of those children are from Wolf Meadow? Because I'm with Rob. I have a real concern because you're taking those children that are on a year-round school and you're taking them, that's completely different than anything else. So I'm real concerned with those. How many would be in that?
Well, keep in mind,
Page 15, girl.
yeah, keep in mind that any time we redistricted when there was, because there was previously Royal Oaks was on a year-round school some years ago. We've always taken that into consideration with redistricting, so that in Royal Oaks' case years ago, we put it back on a traditional calendar.
And that didn't stay long at all. We need to reassess that whole situation.
I'm sure Wolf Meadow would not want us to do that. I think they like what's going on there.
Yeah, I'm saying is that is a point of consideration. It has been in the past.
Ms. Carpenter, to answer your question, speaking about R. Brown McAllister specifically, that the Wolf Meadow students would be redistricted to the proposed larger R. Brown McAllister is an estimated 242 students.
That are going from there?
Correct.
Which opens up seats
For
perhaps to Fur or something
a Fur
on
or a
Pitts School
Pitts,
Roads.
right.
Pitts School Road would be first, yeah.
That's almost half the population.
You have to understand too that when we built Weddington Hills Elementary School, we took almost half the population from Wolf Meadows at that time to fill Weddington Hills. So basically Weddington Hills used to go all the way to 29. So, I mean, Wolf Meadows went all the way to 29 at that time. So, those kids could provide relief from Weddington Hills through Wolf Meadows through R. Brown McAllister.
Your goal is to relieve Weddington Hills. That's what the goal is, or Pitts School and Furs, all three?
It's to help all of the schools that are further on the west side, yes,
So
where we have the severe overcrowding.
may I ask a question, please?
Over in that area wouldn't make sense?
Yeah, I think we're trying to combine growth seats with replacement of older schools. It's a dual purpose.
Can I ask for some clarification, please? Does Wolf Meadow have a waiting? Does Wolf Meadow have a waiting list? No.
Okay, yeah, that's why I want to get that motion done. So we have a motion on the table to table the prior motion until next Monday's agenda. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, so Barry, what was yours? No. Okay. So that's a 5-2 to table the motion. Okay. So where were we on the regular discussion? We've tabled it, but now we have,
Now we just have to put down what our requirements are for them to provide us by next meeting.
yes, so we probably really need that to staff, because they're still on summer schedule, really by Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. So pretty quick, whatever you need. And please don't come next Monday saying I didn't have a piece of
So, Ms.
information.
Reimer?
So I've got the capacities and projections for each school. Holly, you requested that, is that correct? You want it for each and every school, middle school, high school, elementary school? Just elementary? Okay.
Yeah, I actually think we need the high school too, because we need
Right.
to know what this flow of capital plan is and how it's impacted.
Okay.
Because if you insert another project in the middle, this was already very aggressive. And
Yes.
to go back to the board's priorities, as we responded to Mr. Schultz previously, and funding as the number one, rose to the top, I think that's still the big, because the county has the courthouse going. They're having, the community is very interested in senior center, library improvements. So we have to mesh with, we don't get everything we ask for, you know that. We have to mesh with what they have on their agenda.
And then I also heard, the point of clarification, I think this would be to Ms. Carpenter's original motion. So if Beverly Hills were placed in at 2024 along, and you said along with R. Brown McAllister, what were your thoughts on Coulter and Webb in that time frame? Because that was a, well, no, there were two alternatives. There were
24, 26.
an option A and an option B, and the option A took us to,
Depends on where everybody else said. It depends on what we end up doing on Coulter.
and option A says 2024 for Coulter, and option B is 2026.
And that's the whole point. It's going to be whether we get the land.
You know,
That's
a
the
lot
whole
of this,
issue.
you know, if that bond comes through, we may be, we don't know. I mean, if this state bond money comes through, we may be sitting prettier than what we do.
The state bond was only supposed to be about $14 million.
Yeah, but, I mean, some of the
That's in
stuff
theory.
that, we don't know what'll happen.
Yeah, and keep in mind, if that money comes through, it's not ours. It's really, the county has all the projects they're already paying debt service on. What's that? Yeah.
So I had a question, Madam Chair. Ms. Reimer, you know the planning blocks that we used in the study, all that information is updated for this past year, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So that's as good as we're going to get right now, so we could use that information as we begin to look at it as a guide to help us understand some of the population.
Yes. There are a few tiny minor changes that Francis has sent to Cropper that I'm not sure we have yet. They're just minor, one or two students here or there and on one or two pieces of land just because of new growth, but
Right.
they
And
are pretty
and
much essentially the same.
And they won't be able to update that data until probably late fall or
Correct.
early winter.
Correct.
Okay.
If it's only one or two students in playing block, that's not gonna have too much of a difference.
No, that was the point I was trying to make, Rob. I just wanted to make sure that the planning block is at least a reliable source to start with.
Okay, so Mr. Schultz, Mr. Louder, what else do you need from us tonight?
I think that, we spent some time talking about the capacities of the high school. Originally in the past, I don't know if it was two, but at least the past one that was presented to the Board of Education in January, and then the Board of County Commissioners in February. Northwest Cabarrus High School was on at 2024. We bumped it to 2026 to prioritize the older facilities, the downtown school replacements, and increasing seat capacity at elementary school. Are there any additional thoughts on the timing for that? We really wrestled with that one a lot. Looking at 2024, 2025, 2026, and we just, if we continue to grow like we are, we will fill that school when it's built.
Yeah, my concern with visualizing that Excel spreadsheet populated out,
Yeah.
it's going to put a tremendous amount of money with really the middle school at that point having just opened, doing the land acquisitions, and then having multiple schools in progress. So R. Brown, Colton Webb in process at the same time. A high school is a huge amount of money, and I know we need it, but you got to weigh that against what can you accomplish, and would the county realistically give us that amount of money in a couple consecutive years? Now some members of the board want to throw in Beverly Hills. That adds additional money. And I personally was already very concerned about my, I'll say, mental mapping against this timeline, that it was already extremely aggressive. I don't expect that we're going to get $50 to $80 million in a year. I don't think that will happen.
And I'm going to poll again because I see the bubble we have right now in the elementary school, which is rather large.
Mm-hmm.
If I do not open that school for 8 more years or 7 more years, that bubble is going to slap us all over the head.
You're talking about the high school?
Yes. To the point where we're not even going to be able to even get close to capacity, or, meeting that capacity need. So we have to really think about that. I mean, even though I know we'd love to, elementary right now, we've got to do that, but we still got to think about this elementary population we have today. Mm-hmm. 6 years from now, we'll be right in high school and going very strong. So we've got to really look at that timeline. Just pushing dollars is one thing. I can't push students. They're going to continue to grow. They're not going to change. Okay, they don't really care about the funding. They're going to keep growing to from now to 12th grade. So
You're saying high school is a priority?
I'm just saying you can't let it fall in priority to the point at the expense of elementaries just because of the money, because the population is still going to be there whether we fund it or not.
Mm-hmm.
But Tim, then I think the flip side of that is we've got to be careful. If we're not going to do elementaries, then we're going to close a school, that we're going to lose those 400 seats, and you're back to that same kind of bubble, but in the different level. You're just flipping one for the other, and the high school is a lot more expensive than those elementaries. So
yeah,
it's just.
And I think the flow of the students and where you need the space is something we continually lose sight of. With having the two, Colton Webb and R. Brown, adjacent to schools that are further in the middle of the capacity challenges, that gives us more flexibility to move over. With Beverly Hills up against Royal Oaks and Wynkoff, which both currently have seats, that's not where we need the seats right now. So. Y'all know I study the maps too much. Just trying to be realistic and fiscally responsible. So, okay, so is there anything else we need to do in open session? Okay. I will take a motion that the board convene in closed session to consult with an attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege pursuant to General Statute 143, 318, 11A3, and to consider confidential personnel matters, consider pursuant to General Statute 143, 318, 11A6. Mr. Harrison made the motion. Mrs. Grimsley made the second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes 7-0. Thank you to our viewing audience, and good evening.